Welcome to this recording, organized by Carleton University's Technology Innovation Management Program at the Sprott School of Business. We named this workshop Adopting Quantum-Safe Technologies to address the urgency of securing our digital future. It originally took place on Thursday, May 8th, 2025. We are grateful to the knowledgeable speakers who contributed to this event, the management of Carleton University for supporting us, and the team at the TIM program for bringing it to life. This recording contains 9 talks followed by a panel discussion. Between the talks, you will hear the voice of Professor Stoyan Tanev, the event's host and organizer, as he introduces the speakers. We were delighted to have the welcoming remarks delivered by Sandra Crocker, Associate Vice President, Strategic Initiatives and Operations at Carleton University. She starts us off. We hope you enjoy the show.
Morning, everyone. Early. This is not Friday. Thank you very much, Stoyan and Bruno and Joanne, for co-hosting this event. I think it's a really important one. I'm delighted to be here on behalf of the University Administration. I'd like to thank everyone who's joining us here today in person and also those who are online. I understand it's a hybrid meeting. I would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather here today at Carleton is the traditional unceded and unsurrendered lands of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. In making this acknowledgement, we're recognizing more than just a place. It's an affirmation of our ongoing commitment on behalf of the institution to continue to strive towards conciliation in all of our activities, in our research, in our teachings, and in our community outreach. It's a pleasure to welcome you all here today to today's workshop on the adoption of quantum-safe technologies to secure our digital future. It is fantastic to see so many thought leaders, innovators, and researchers gathered to explore this important topic. I want to extend a special thank you to our outstanding lineup of speakers and panelists for generously taking the time to share their expertise with us today. And of course, a sincere thank you to the Sprott School of Business and the Technology Innovation Management Program for organizing today's event. As many of you are aware, the TIM program is a leader in connecting academic research with real-world innovation. And today's fantastic example is one of those examples of this strength in action. Today's workshop represents a timely and important conversation. One that reflects not only where the world is headed, but also the very real urgency we face right now in preparing our digital infrastructure for a quantum future. At Carleton, we recognize how vital this moment is. The transition to quantum-safe technologies will reshape how we secure information, how we protect our economics, and importantly, how we maintain trust in everything from government systems to private communications. That's why we've made quantum and quantum-safe networking in particular a strategic priority for Carleton. Across our campus, we're investing in research excellence and talent development in quantum and cybersecurity, fostering a vibrant and growing ecosystem in this space. To provide a sense of the scale and the momentum that's building, Carleton is home to more than 110 expert researchers working in quantum and quantum adjacent technologies, cybersecurity included, cryptography, and other related fields, with 32 labs and facilities across our campus supporting quantum research and development. We currently offer more than 160 courses that support quantum advancement, but not specifically in quantum. And over 545 Carleton graduate students are actively engaged in research or programs related to quantum-safe technologies. At present, we also have 60 ongoing active research grants exploring everything from quantum sensing to secure communication. So looking ahead, we're also preparing to launch 3 new academic programs that will help address the growing need for highly trained professionals in these emerging fields. First, our new Bachelor of Cybersecurity will launch in just a few months in the fall of 2025, which will be featuring a strong emphasis on quantum-safe networking, designed to prepare students to meet the cybersecurity challenges of tomorrow. We'll also move to establish an undergraduate program in quantum engineering physics over the next 2 academic cycles. More immediately, we are preparing a new Master's of Science in Physics, which is tentatively titled Quantum Science and Technology, to launch in 2026. This program will strengthen Canada's capacity for research and innovation in quantum, while also creating new pathways for graduate students. Critical to the success of this program will be a mandatory internship, and we're actively seeking advice from our industry and government partners as to the best positioning for this. These efforts are part of Carleton's broader quantum strategy initiative, as Stoyan intimated. It's an ambitious cross-campus effort that brings together expertise from the faculties of engineering and design, science, public and global affairs, and the Sprott School of Business. Through this initiative, we've identified 6 core research strengths that define Carleton's contributions in this space: quantum communications, quantum cryptography and security, quantum mechanics, quantum sensing, quantum commercialization, and nanotechnologies. While Carleton is a research-intensive university, we also understand that the power of quantum cannot be fully realized through discovery alone. We must also bring our innovations to the world in meaningful and impactful ways. As we move into the quantum era, industry and academic partnerships will play a vital role in ensuring that Canada remains at the forefront, not just as a leader in science and research, but also as a trusted innovator in global markets. Carleton is committed to fostering strong collaborative relationships in this realm. We believe in developing solutions side by side with business leaders, creating tailored partnerships that address real-world problems while advancing research and training. Whether it's through joint projects, student placements, or long-term commercialization strategies, we want to be a hub where breakthrough research meets practical innovation. So once again, thank you for being here. Your presence speaks to the importance of this conversation and to the shared commitment we all have towards building a secure and innovative digital future. I hope you enjoy the day. I look forward to the insights and connections that will emerge from today's discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. Now I would like to invite Joanne Hyland. Joanne is co-founder and president of the rInnovation Group and former vice president of new venture development at Nortel. She is an internationally known innovation strategist, architect, orchestrator, implementation expert, and author. She's part of the advisory board of the International Society for Professional Innovation Management, which is our international partner in running this event, and many of the participants online are from Europe. This is something that, a partnership that we have been enjoying for the last more than 15 years, probably, from 2008 and earlier. Joanne, please, welcome.
Thank you, Stoyan, and thank you for inviting me to do the welcome on behalf of ISPIM. I'm delighted to be here online. I wish I could be there in person. I think Stoyan asked me because I'm also a fellow Canadian, so very proud of what Canada's doing in this domain. Just a little bit about ISPIM and kind of where it's come from. So it was formed in Norway in 1983. It stands for the International Society for Professional Innovation Management, as Stoyan mentioned earlier. Our membership is growing actually quite rapidly. The last time I looked on the website, we were at 5,000. I looked yesterday. Now we're at 5,200 members from over 100 countries. It is the oldest and the largest and the most active, truly global innovation network in the world. We have 12 special interest groups, of which the one that Stoyan is involved in, called Digital Disruption and Transformation, is one of the key ones that's driving the future of very important topics. I'm also involved in another special interest group called the Innovation Body of Knowledge, and we're focused more from the international standards perspective around the innovation management system and building a body of knowledge so that we can bring that to the profession of innovation management and, of course, to all of the professionals that are a part of that. The other part is that we've had a long connection through Ottawa with ISPIM. There was an event in 2019. I'm not sure how many of you were there, but we actually had an ISPIM Connects event at that time. We had, I think it was close to 250 people that were present. It was a very successful conference. Stoyan also mentioned a few other things that have been going on, more recent events. He did allude to the Quantum Technology Entrepreneurship Workshop that has been being taken on by the Special Interest Group. But there's also Design Thinking for Digital Transformation Conference that also happened in February of 24. So there's been quite a lot of activity going on. So I just wanted to also take the opportunity, because when I saw the title Quantum Safe, I obviously, have heard about quantum computing, but quantum safe was a new term for me. And I decided to just sort of look it up and get a sense of what it was all about. And this morning I was reading a Fast Company article, and I saw that Cisco, in conjunction with UC Santa Barbara, has just come up with a new entanglement chip that could speed up the practical quantum computing application by it, maybe even up to a decade. It was quoted as about 5 to 10 years. So there's clearly a lot of breakthroughs that are happening in the space. And I think they're also happening from an exponential point of view with all of the developments that are coming forward with AI and other areas. So it's very interesting to see this. I was involved in neural network technology back at Nortel Networks in the late 90s. In fact, we had a venture based on it. So we've been watching the developments, and now quantum computing is coming along, and clearly making sure that quantum is safe is a big part of securing the digital future. So with that, I just want to also mention, in case anyone can join us, that we have our next ISPIM conference coming up in Bergen, Norway in June. It's actually from the 15th to the 18th of June. The theme is innovation powered by nature, and we're expecting up to 600, maybe more delegates from over 50 countries. So once again, thank you for being able to welcome everybody on behalf of ISPIM. Maybe you can join us in Bergen, and please keep up the great work in an area that is very important for our future. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. Thank you very much. We have 9 speakers today. There will be break at 11 o'clock. Each speaker will have 20 minutes. Questions will be left for the panel discussions at the end. Of course, if there is something intuitive and you die to share it, you can just do it. But the point is that we keep the conversations, the dialogue for the panel discussion at the end. And we'll start with Bruno Couillard, our co-organizer of Crypto4A, who is the CEO of the company, who will start first, not just because he's a co-organizer, but because Crypto4A is one of the companies that really has something to offer in the domain, and it's well known for their contributions to post-quantum cryptography.
Thank you, Joanne. Yeah, and I would also really like to thank Tony. Because of him, many years ago, probably eight some years ago, we had a meeting here at Carleton in a different building. I don't think this existed. And he offered generously for Crypto4A, which at the time were the 4 founders, to have a spot to collaborate at the location you had at Invest Ottawa at the Bayview Yard. So thanks to him, we were able to start building a company from there. And that's why I think this is just a return on our your contribution. Thank you again. Really appreciate it. Today, as Stoyan said, the intent here is to give you a sense of what is it that we do, why is it so critical that we migrate to this notion of being quantum ready or quantum safe. And I will start like this. I'm assuming many of you think in terms of business and commercial sizes and so on. So I wanted to put that chart here, which really represents the global economy, the size of the global economy. And the one number I want you to think of at the moment is the $105 trillion number at the top. This seems to be, according to these estimates, the global economy in, I believe, 2023. It's probably bigger by now. Well, there has been some recent event, but let's assume it's there. Of that economy, roughly a third of it, is referred to nowadays as the digital economy. So it's about $35 trillion worth of global transactions that now rely on this notion of the digital economy. And I'd like quickly to ask a show of hands of those of you that think your career or where you're going or where you come from could have existed in 1925, let's say 100 years ago. Could you do what you think you're going to do or have done in 1925, same business? Chances are very few of you could, in 1925, do the exact same jobs you do today. And the reason for that, a lot of us, most of us, are attached somehow to that digital economy. We have bankers, we have lawyers, but every single one of us in our jobs are touched by this concept of the world's economy that's digital and that's cyber. Now, this chart is an interesting one. It's really referring to how has the economy transformed? And it's a very rough, it's not, super duper precise, but it gives you something interesting here in that it goes through the S&P 500 index, and it sort of talks about the companies at the top of the chart in 1975, 85, 95, and so on. And they're looking at two categories of companies. Those companies that produce goods or tangible things, and those companies that produce intangible things. And one thing that you'll find is the gray portion. So if you look at the chart, in 1975, the blue segment is a fairly small, it's much smaller than those producing tangible assets. And the companies that are the biggest one will produce machinery, they'll have plants, they'll do gas, oil and gas, and so on. If you go all the way to 2018, you realize that by that point, our economy has shifted, and those companies that are the giants typically have the intangible, their ads, and they sell you cloud computing and so on and so forth. So the reality of our world has shifted, but there's also something quite interesting about that part here. In 1995, something seems to happen to the world. It seems like we somehow figured something we had not figured before. And if you look at that, it really corresponds to something that some of us had the privilege to see from our own eyes. It's called the internet. It's called the SSL. It's called Netscape. So if you've been browsing on the internet, chances are today you would not even, well, if you're young, you're likely not going to remember what Netscape was about. But in 1995, that was a massive, this was the big bang moment for the digital economy. Someone, somewhere, had figured, how could we take this internet gadget? It's a thing, it connects people, but so what? And somehow created from that an ability to actually transact commercial transactions from something that now connected the global humanity in ways we had never figured to do ever before in the history of humanity. Like if you think of commerce, for a vast majority of the history of mankind, you had to know people, you had to have handshakes, you had to be aware of who you're dealing with before you would transact. Suddenly, the internet comes up, and we're sitting there in our homes, in our, however you're dressed, and you're able to connect to a website. The padlock at the top will tell you, yeah, someone that you don't know trust that that website is indeed a bank or a commerce, and you can indeed push your credit card and you will receive some goods or some services. That moment caused a cataclysm that humanity is still expanding. It's a big bang moment of the digital economy, if you want to think of it that way. So if you go back to that slide, you can see the blue is really now expanding at a much faster pace than the rest of the economy. And this is because we had found this triad of how to take some of our earlier inventions called cryptography and turn those into tools that could be put out there in the likes of SSL, PKI that would produce certificates, and machines called HSMs. And those HSMs at the bottom were kind of there to protect. It's the black box that protects those private-public key pair. So when you think of the transactions we've been able to achieve with that sort of momentous moment, it's all based on cybersecurity. We were able to finally connect the dots. But cybersecurity had existed since probably the 50s, maybe even before. We knew how to secure communication. In fact, Caesar, back in the pre-Roman era, knew how to secure connection. They had a trick. They did know how to secure their communication, but they just knew how to keep it confidential. They were not able to apply something, some mathematical trick and genius to slap something on those communication to provide authenticity of who am I talking to. So the only way you could do that, authenticity, was to trust that whoever brings you key material you trust that person. So it was, again, human beings connecting to human beings. In our world of cybersecurity, we typically think in terms of three things: confidentiality, integrity or authenticity, and availability. But for the most part, we usually, if you talk to many cyber people and think in terms of cryptography, you will hear confidentiality being something quite easy for us all to talk about. It's the protecting your information, making sure no one can look at your information. But that piece there, called the integrity and the authenticity, was the piece that we unlocked in 1995 with SSL and PKI and certificate authorities and HSMs. That thing provided the ability to actually achieve trust on the internet, and that moment caused the entire digital economy to prosper. So I'm going to do this very quickly, and I'm assuming we'll pass the slides after so you can read those. But the point of confidentiality, if you're in a party and you want to tell someone that you know a few things, when it comes to confidentiality, it's usually algorithms that are conceived as symmetric algorithm. So if you and I have to have a secure communication, you and I have a key, think of a door key, that will allow me to lock, ship, and you can unlock. And that communication will be secure to anyone that wants to intercede or intercept it. So that's confidentiality. And space and symmetric key. And the best known algorithm that does that today is called AES. And you may hear key sizes. So all the things in red are the three things or four things you want to keep in mind. Confidentiality, you have symmetric, AES, and key size will either be 128 bits of keys or 256 bits of keys. That's a simplest, like, very Cole's note kind of thing. In the world of integrity and authenticity, what happened there was this moment was unlocked again. I'd say this invention came out of 1977 era. So it's been 50 years. And the invention was called RSA. And the name of it comes from the three mathematicians that came up with the idea. One of them, I believe, still teaches at MIT, Rivest. Another one, I believe, is back in Israel, Shamir. And I think Adelman is somewhere at the University of Texas. So these guys are still amongst us, living amongst those of us that care about these giants. But RSA has been the workhorse of cybersecurity since the 70s. But we really unlocked its power in 1995 with SSL and PKI. And again, if you want to remember a few things, RSA does two things. It's just a phenomenal algorithm. It's got such versatility. It's been used pretty much everywhere. And it can provide digital signature. Also, it provides something called key distribution. It allows me to send you keys without having to ship someone physically walk to you to get your key, as long as I've got your public key. So RSA gives me this great thing. You will find that RSA keys vary quite a lot. When I got in this business, the size of RSA keys was 512, and it's grown to 768, and it's grown to 1024, and it's now 2048 is usually your bottom scale. And you want to try and keep growing these keys, and as the compute capabilities out there are going bigger, we tend to just increase the key size. As I said, it can be used for both key distribution and digital signatures. And in the same range, you might also hear about a variety of different algorithms called also digital signatures, like DSA and ECDSA, and Diffie-Hellman and ECDH. And you don't have to worry about that for a party. Like, as long as you remember RSA, you're good. The challenge that we have today in our space is that this thing called the quantum computers, and it's been in the mind of mathematicians since 1994, 1995, 6, 7. Folks that came up with the idea that, you know what, if we had these machines one day, we might actually be able to break those mathematical problems that RSA depends on. Not just RSA, but RSA, ECDSA, DH, Diffie-Hellman, and so on. So that was prediction back in 1994, someone said, hey, you know what? Those algorithms that we're using everywhere, one day they'll go broke on us because we may have this quantum computing capability. The world back then said, who cares? Move on. Nowadays, though, this is much closer to being a reality. We heard Joanne earlier mentioning the fact that almost on a, not a monthly basis, but you get these announcements telling us that quantum computers are getting closer and closer to being real. And the chances are that the day they are real, we might not hear. Depending on who gets there first, we may not be told that they exist. So this is why a huge amount of efforts are going on right now to try and get our infrastructure, ensure that the digital economy that we have built for the last 30 years remains functional. And it needs to remain functional because of our society is so much becomes so dependent on it. In this world, one of the things that you will hear as well is when quantum computers do exist, they have the ability to impact both your digital signatures and your symmetric key algorithms. There are two major algorithms known as Shor and Grover. One of them reduces the strength of your AES. You remember AES from earlier? Well, instead of using a 128-bit key, just move to the 256. You're good for a while. Don't worry. However, the RSA, ECDSA, Diffie-Hellman, ECDH, all of these algorithms just vanish. They don't, there's no, I think the estimated key size that one would require to produce would be in the thousands and thousands of bits to try and keep RSA functional. It's a non-starter. So what happened there was a few years back, NIST launched a global program to attempt, and not attempt, but to actually change our foundational algorithm, the cryptography that we've been using since 1995. And what they did there was they launched with the goal of replacing our cryptography for both key distribution purposes and digital signature purposes. And what they produced, I'm going to spare you all the details from 2016 to today. There's been a whole lot of things that have happened. But from that day to today, they've been able to produce, at this point in time, 5 known quantum safe, well, hope to be quantum safe, cryptographic algorithm. And all of us have been, for those of us working in that field, we've been told many, many times that this is brand new concepts and thinking. And so the cryptography we're about to produce in vast deployments, we're hoping will actually be able to last the many years forward. But we're not sure. So to guarantee that there's a thinking built into our design, you will also hear a lot of people talking about cryptographic agility. So this is the concept that not only do we have to change things, but we have to make sure that wherever we land, we have the ability to keep landing further or different places. So that's crypto agility. And this is kind of a very rough idea of what quantum safe or post-quantum cryptography is all about. So what do we do in that space? We Crypto4e, we basically build some of these components of this ecosystem. They're called HSM. We have an HSM product line. I brought one of those samples here. Not going to sell today. I'm not here to sell, but I wanted to give you a sense of these machines are actually real. They do exist. They do actually achieve quantum safe capability today, and they've been actually deployed in operational capacities. You will hear from my colleagues and other speakers about different elements and components of the network. Just in the HSM sort of area alone, this is a likely market size of in the 20 billion-ish over time. There are lots of jobs related to that. And we are based here in Ottawa we're working really hard with the community. We're working with schools. We're getting a lot of engineers to come through our facility and co-op programs. And we're hoping to create, from a Canadian perspective, this nascent, or I'll call it the second generation, because there's also been in Ottawa in the 90s, quite a lot of anchor capability, like PKI construct from Entrust, a lot of things that have been created. I used to be part of a company called Chrysalis ITS. We did HSMs back in the 90s. So this is a real kind of capability. And the idea here is that what we're trying to get to is to replace that HSM construct in the triad to ensure we lock the future of trust in the quantum safe capability. So I'll stop here. I think I'm within my times, but I wanted to give you a sense of this is a really, really, really important effort. All of us are somehow involved, whether you're in school, in technology, in the business world. It's an important aspect, and we cannot simply think, someone will take care of it. This is our way of living now that's depending on this digital economy, this cybersecure world. So hopefully you got something out of this, and I'll sit here to have some questions at the end.
Thank you so much. It's a nice contextualization of the where we are now. Okay, so we'll continue with our next speaker, Matej Charbonneau. He's the head of quantum safe networks in the network infrastructure business group at Nokia. He pioneered commercialization of quantum safe networking solutions at Nokia, focusing on quantum era cybersecurity. He partners with critical infrastructure organizations and enterprises in emphasizing the urgency of securing network infrastructure through comprehensive defense and depth strategies. He's from a global company, but he's a Canadian living in here in Ottawa.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's good to
Thank you very much.
Please.
Thank you very much. Thank you for Carleton Carleton University for inviting me, Sandra, Stoyan, even yourself, Mr. Couillard. Thank you very much. It's with great pleasure that we're taking a moment here in this community, in my community, in our community, to actually talk about this very important topic. And I think you did a terrific job introducing the topic on hand. I'll try to amplify a little bit using some of the messages that I have the pleasure to deliver worldwide, but specifically, and I would have to say more precisely and often in Europe, Middle East and Africa, Asia Pacific, and not enough in America. So that's why, as well, part of a member of this community, that's why spending time with all of you on this topic makes a lot of sense for many reasons that Bruno already talked about. So Nokia first, right? We are not the Nokia of the cell phone that you may remember. For some of you who remember that Nokia was before the iPhone, a leader in cellular communication. This is the Nokia that enables the world to connect. So we're a technology manufacturer for wireless networks and wireline networks. So IP networks, optical networks, fixed access, fiber to the home type networks, terrestrial, subsea. Really, our mission is to equip the enterprises and the service providers to help all of us communicate. And in that context, right, I'm part of the network infrastructure business group, but I'm the leader for Nokia with regards to quantum safe connectivity, or enabling the world to connect with a new type of outcome, having connections that are quantum computer safe. So this workshop is about adopting quantum safe technologies. I claim that before we adopt technologies, we have to understand why are these even of merit? How can one adopt? And then what are the best technologies to adopt? If there's one thing I want to leave you with, even before starting, quantum safe does not equal quantum technologies. And I think Bruno just showed us a little bit, right? So there's many ways that we can adopt technologies and practices to elevate our game and become quantum safe, but it doesn't mean that we need to adopt right away quantum tech. So I thought of using my standard charts, right? Showing you what we're showing to the rest of the planet all the time, right? So Bruno alluded to already, we are ushering as a humanity in a new type of technology era, quantum 2.0, where quantum computers are now existing. They're being scaled up every day as we speak, massive amount of investments globally on quantum computing. Quantum networks first use cases exist in the form of cryptography, quantum key distribution systems. More use cases are being worked on, quantum repeaters, quantum memories, and so on. Quantum sensing also starts to take shape. So much so, and to echo what Bruno said, right? Since 2022, the World Economic Forum has actually coined that we're part of a new phase of our digital economy, the quantum secure economy. Now, when I saw this in 2022, that's where I stopped what I was doing at Nokia in terms of leading emerging innovation. And I asked to be put on the side to define quantum safe connectivity, quantum safe networks. The fact that the World Economic Forum is talking about the economy is not a science, right? It's not a revolution. The fact that they're talking about the quantum economy makes sense from a technology advancements where we are, but they wedged the word secure between quantum and economy, the quantum secure economy. And I think Bruno just talked to you a little bit about why. It's because of this quantum computer, right? So this quantum computer that has an ability and proven ability to break codes. So we at Nokia define a value proposition around quantum safe networks, and I'll try to explain to you how that fits in this overall ecosystem. So Bruno just talked to us about this, right? The ICT industry has already started a major migration in cryptography. We know that the codes upon which we've built our digital economy are going to be shattered, destroyed by quantum computer at one point in time. So the whole point of adopting new technologies here makes sense if you put yourself in risk mitigation, in risk management type of situation. So we cannot afford as society to lose trust in our data confidentiality, integrity, and authenticity. So thus, we need to pose action today to secure our future. And this makes a lot of sense in terms of looking at this first, not from a technology, but from a risk and a risk management sets of activities. So when the World Economic Forum talked about a quantum secure economy, our first question was, well, how do we underpin a quantum secure economy? Well, we need to focus on a quantum secure and trusted digital foundation. At the macro level, that's the mission. That's the mission that we have to focus on as technology enablers, as the industry, as technology adopters. That's what we should all strive to achieve. In achieving this and preparing, the solution to propose to actors on how to connect, we need to prepare for known quantum attacks. So Bruno talked to us about, the best of mathematics crypto codes that we've been using for the last 3-4 decades are going to be shattered. What have we done as an industry? Well, we invented new codes, PQC, one new CAM, another one who's coming out, a few more digital signature algorithms. New algorithms are being invented with the hope that they will resist quantum computer-based attack. We cannot prove that these algorithms will resist over time. That's what Bruno talked about. He said, we have to be crypto agile. We have to, in our digital fabrics, find ways to implement solutions that are quantum safe with the best of mathematics, but being able to actually change these algorithms as we develop more algorithms, as they get weakened, we actually change them again and again and again. But also claim that we also need to be prepared for advance in code breaking. So what if these algorithms one day are broken and substitution are not readily available? They will take time. Let's say you have a delta T between a break and a restoration. So when we talk, we say to the industry, well, we think we need to think about it architecting a digital fabric that has a defense in depth, many layers of defense, and that's what we're going to quickly look at. In order to do this, we're claiming that not only we have to take the best of mathematics, like the new algorithms post-quantum cryptography, we also have to look at the rest of the toolkit. Let's take the best that physics can give us as well. Classical physics, quantum physics. So bottom line, at Nokia, when we look at all the use cases of enterprises and service providers, terrestrial, subsea, wireless, wireline, we cannot see how the digital fabric of the future can be quantum safe with only one technology. We need a basket of technologies. No one solution fits all use cases. So what we've defined is a defense in depth type approach where crypto agility meets another key concept that I would like you to leave with, crypto resiliency. So networks that we enable to enterprises and carriers are engineered for availability downtime of 5 minutes per year, so 99.999. So in a quantum safe world, we need to aspire to a highly available quantum safe future. So in that context, we believe that not only the application layer needs to be quantum safe. So red applications are those applications using the RSA Diffie-Hellman type codes of yesterday. They will migrate to black application in my schema over time using post-quantum cryptography, best of mathematics. But when you look at the network that enables the world to connect, the blue layers, you see them in local area networks, metropolitan area networks, wide area networks, terrestrial, subsea, satellite-based networks. Basically, all application on this planet uses some type of networking technologies to actually connect endpoints. These blue networks can also be activated in terms of creating additional lines of defense in a quantum safe future. And depending on the type of connections we're talking, if I take physical layer, optical networks, data center interconnect, or data center access, the characteristics of these connections are much more engineered. These networks are built at a given point in time, and they're quite stable. They persist through time. And that persistent means that the endpoints know each other, that I can actually better use physics-based symmetric cryptography as key distribution, classical physics, pre-shared keys, or quantum-based physics. Physics-based cryptography is proven to be not breakable by quantum computers. But we're not saying that we replace one versus the other. We're saying we should look at the holistic OSI stack, ask ourselves how we can create resiliency by using complementary crypto system. Best of mathematics, PQC, crypto agility in terms of a business process to actually change the algos as they get weakened and new algos are being defined. Defense in depth, activating complementary layers of defense using complementary crypto system from physics. So physics and maths together assures a greater future. My only chart about my corporation, right? We already have solution from IP networks and optical networks that are certified and qualified by different cybersecurity agencies and processes with regards to enabling quantum safe connectivity. We have, and we're very proud to talk about 100+ networks as we speak in the world that have quantum safe connections up and running. The majority of these use cases are really in public sector, military, government, mission critical infrastructures, and specifically not in North America, but another portion of the world, and I'll let you just think about why. The whole point is my job at Nokia is enabling the world to connect with wireline networks, wireless networks. We have ways to manufacture keys like with crypto foray, but there's different, and I think Bruno, you talked about that as well. There's different ways that you can actually create a quantum safe key and distribute that key. So there's different use cases on how a quantum safe key can be distributed to connections to create this defense in depth fabric that I talked about, from quantum physics to classical physics to manual human intervention. all of these could result into a quantum safe connection. So what we see right now, campus network, data center interconnect, cloud access, networks, for these types of actors, that's the type of discussions we're having on a regular basis across 135 countries on the planet. Like I said, a lot more in Europe, Middle East and Africa, and Asia Pacific at this time, not enough in this region. Now, in closing, for us, quantum safe network is an outcome. So it's not a technology and it's not a product. It's an outcome. It's an outcome that is realized by using technologies and products. It's an outcome that you can reach in today's classical networks by applying quantum safe cryptography techniques, best of maths, best on physics, at the application level, at the networking level in a defense in depth structure, to give this trust that we need to have today in our data confidentiality, integrity, and authenticity, so that we can continue to think that we will have a future that will usher toward the use cases, the usage of more quantum-based technologies, quantum communication. And at that point, the quantum internet, the pure act of communicating and realizing a connection, you achieve what? You achieve the outcome of quantum safe. Because if you communicate in the quantum internet with quantum entanglement practices, if your communication goes through, you know that it was not eavesdrop. So you are quantum safe by design in the future. Today, we need to pose action to get to that outcome. So for us, it's all about the outcome. It's all about the why are we doing this, risk mitigation, applying different products from vendors like Nokia, from Crypto4A, evolutionQ, and others to realize one purpose, trust in our digital infrastructure. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Martin. Really, the words that we use reflect what we are actually focusing on. The idea that it's an quantum safety is a outcome and not just a technological feature is absolutely amazing, because it shows that there are so many other things that need to work together so that we could end up with being quantum safe. Thank you, Martin. So as you see the logic of the presenters, we have first the companies that are directly involved in developing such type of solutions. And the next company is ISARA. And this is Philippe Lafrance, who is a standards manager at ISARA Corporation. Yeah. Philippe is an information security professional holding a master's degree in mathematics and CISSP certification. He's the interim lead of the Quantum Industry Canada Standards Working Group, specializing in quantum safe migration strategies, cryptographic discovery, risk management, and zero trust architectures. Please.
Thank you so much. Okay. I have a tendency to wander, but this is where the mic is, so I'm going to try to stay stationary. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Happy to be here. I have sort of halfway artistically decided to name this presentation The Great PQC Transition, Lights, Camera, Then Action. And I chose this intentionally because I sort of want to tell you a little bit of a story. So let's get into it. I want to start by saying some things that I hope are non-controversial. So let's start with all organizations everywhere need to make decisions about their cryptography. Why? Because eventually all organizations are going to have to transition to PQC, to post-quantum cryptography. And we can spend all day, all morning talking about the nature of this urgency, the different personae involved. So which organizations probably should have already started their transition? Which ones for now is probably a good time to start, and which ones maybe realistically can afford to wait just a little bit. But that's the catch. That categorization still has to be made, and each organization needs to decide for themselves when they should transition to PQC and how they should do it. And those are distinct questions, and I'll talk about that a little more at the end. So this sort of leads to the first fundamental question I have is, how should organizations make these decisions about when and how to transition to PQC? And what I want to do with this presentation is I want to explore these questions through the lens of more general cybersecurity risk. Because these risks we have associated with our cryptography, right, our cryptographic risk, if you will, are really just a specialized kind of cybersecurity risk. And so really, at the end of the day, these decisions about when and how we transition to PQC are largely, if not entirely, really decisions about cybersecurity risk management. And so that's cool because in a normal organization, what do they do around cyber risk management? How do they make good investments, intelligent, efficient decisions, informed choices around managing their cyber risk? They use data, they use information, they have good information on which they make their decisions. Excellent, it's kind of leading it. So my next fundamental question here is, what information do I need to make an informed decision about managing my quantum risk, my PQC transition? Okay, well, probably should point it over here. In general, what do organizations do? How do organizations generally manage their cyber risk? At least very essentially, very basic level. So what are the fundamental essential questions at the very least you need to know? It's not the complete story, but essentially. You need to know, what is my risk today and my expected risk in the future. You need to know what your risk appetite is, your risk tolerance, how much risk can you handle? And then you need to be able to compare these two things. Do you expect your risk to be more than you can tolerate? And if so, what do you do to mitigate that risk? If you expect it to already be at a tolerable level, great. What do you have to do to keep it there? Because security is a moving target. You need to actively engage with these things. So again, not the full story, but at the very least, organizations need to get some answers to these essential questions in terms of PQC. Okay, so nothing too deep here so far. So let's keep going. In general, how do organizations gather answers to such essential questions? How do they process that information? And how do they ultimately act on it? Well, my claim is this all comes about through the processes related to the management of their cybersecurity posture. Phrased differently, it all comes about through security posture management. If you're not familiar with the term security posture, don't worry about it. I think a nice, clean way to think about it is just like this. It is the state of an organization's defenses against cyber threats. You can think of it as comprising the policies, the processes, the technologies, and the people that all come together, work together, protect the organization's cyber assets, digital assets, and also protect the operational continuity. Now, you can define a security posture in many ways. You can divvy it up into any number of components, but really the point is the establishment of these components, the management of these components, and the relationships between them is really what defines and establishes an organization's security posture, an organization's cyber defenses, rather. So we don't need to get into the details, but for example, this is a nice way that you can define it and break it up into all these nice little pieces. But my point is, general cybersecurity risk, general cyber decisions are really decided upon and managed through these components, through your cybersecurity posture management. So we want to solve an issue around cyber risk related to PQC specifically. Ideally, this is where we'd find the answers. This is where we want to look. But the thing is, at the end of the day, turns out most organizations aren't tracking this stuff. The insights we need about our cryptography, the information about our cryptography, the ability to configure, control, and switch out and manage our cryptography is missing from security postures today. Conclusion, we have gaps in our security postures. And I think that's kind of a big deal. So what do we do about it? Oh yes, critical gap. I didn't take all the animations out. It's a critical gap. Let's emphasize the point. So what do we do about this? You hit the next button, Philip. Cool. How do we shore up these gaps in our security posture? I mean, that was terrible and I apologize. It's pretty straightforward. We just start managing the components that we're not managing so far. If the cryptographic elements aren't being managed, let's start managing the cryptographic elements of our security posture. Phrased differently, let's start engaging in cryptographic posture management. Now, the term cryptographic posture is pretty new, but again, a nice clean way to think of it is like this: the subset of your more general security posture that focuses specifically on cryptography. So all of those same components you just saw, but viewing each of them through the specialized lens of cryptography. And the ultimate goal of security or cryptographic posture management, of course, is to ensure that an organization's cryptographic assets are understood, that they're managed, that they're manageable, and for the sake of this conversation, that they're resilient to quantum computing attack. So they're resilient to quantum threats. There might be some other things you want out of it. So maybe cryptographic agility we talked about. There's things like zero trust, which is excellent, and that is also a part of this. But we're talking about quantum security today. Okay. Again, we don't need to get into the details, but as an example, this is a way you can divvy it up, those same components, and view each of them through that sort of specialized cryptographic lens. I am going on the assumption these slides will be available later. If not, I'll give you my email address at the end. Okay. Philip, how do we start with this cryptographic posture stuff? Well, I mean, like with anything in any organization, it doesn't happen overnight. I mean, it's going to take some time. It's going to take some iterations to get it done. But really, it starts with visibility. So remember what I said. It's about establishing these components, managing them, and the relationships between them. So to do that, you need visibility. If you can't see into these components, if you don't have any idea about what's going on inside them, you have no hope of managing them, certainly not in any halfway efficient way. So it starts with getting that insight into your cryptographic posture. Phrase that a little bit differently, use what's becoming a common term. You need to do a cryptographic posture assessment. You need to assess where are we today before you can start mapping out your journey to where you want to go eventually. So how does one maybe start doing a crypto posture assessment? Well, here's some advice here. Number one, first and foremost, is to inventory your cryptography. Know who, what, where, when, why, and how cryptography is being used in your organization. What are the vulnerabilities? Are they ones that are vulnerabilities today? Is it a harvest and decrypt attack? Is it a bad configuration? Or is it something that will be exploited once a cryptographically relevant quantum computer emerges? So inventory your cryptography, understand your risks, and then use that information with some information I'm going to talk about in a moment to really build your plan for how to transition and when. So moral of the story here, do a crypto posture assessment. Okay, so let's bring this mostly full circle. I'm not quite done yet. Philip, we've done a crypto posture assessment of our organization. What do we do now? So this might be a somewhat unsatisfying answer, but the truth is you need to look beyond just your organization. I mean, wouldn't it be amazing if all the answers we could ever want were just findable in-house? But, you know, the PQC transition is a global effort. And so what I recommend, and I'm sure every other speaker today would recommend, is be mindful. Consider the advice that already exists by experts out there. So on how to transition and threat timelines for quantum computing. So this is not my most elegant slide I've ever made, but hey, I'm trying to be pretty with colors. Here are some recommendations that I highly value, and I'd love to share these with you. So the top one here from the Global Risk Institute, the annual Quantum Threat Timeline Report. This is done by Global Risk Institute in conjunction with the illustrious people over at evolutionQ. You'll hear from one of them shortly. This is the best resource we have for expert best estimates on when a cryptography breaking quantum computer will arrive. So excellent resource. The rest of these are effectively migration strategies, frameworks, sort of techniques for how to put together and effectively execute your transition. So at the bottom here is the NIST National Cybersecurity Center of Excellence. They have this migration project doing playbooks, risk analysis, some really nice stuff. And I think these are all very high value, very useful resources. I'm not just saying that because I had a hand in writing several of them. Okay, so what I want to do to sort of end this off is I want to go through three sort of high-level basic scenarios describing how things can go wrong if you don't do this risk assessment, if you don't do your posture assessment. And I'm going to do this by borrowing the variables from the famous Mosca's XYZ theorem. And if you're not familiar with the theorem, don't worry, read any of these documents for 5 minutes, you'll be well-versed, but you'll get the idea here. So let's start with the shelf life. So we usually denote this as X. It's the length of time for which an asset needs to be protected. How long do I need to protect this thing? How long does the cryptography have to be useful for? And what I'm saying here is the worse you underestimate X, the greater you can expect your future risk to be. Now, don't take this as the hardcore mathematical law, it's something just understand in spirit, because what happens? If you think you don't have to protect something for very long, you're more inclined to not bother planning to migrate it at all. And if it turns out you do have to protect it for longer than you thought, well, then your risk of exposure is just going to be greater. And my caution here is it is not always obvious how long you have to protect something for. Why? Because for your assets, the protection lifetimes can change for any number of reasons. So if you do that posture assessment, you get that visibility, you get a much cleaner understanding of exactly how long you have to protect these things for. Next one is the transition time. So denoted Y, it's the length of time required to actually transition the asset. And what I'll say here is the worse you underestimate Y, the greater you can expect your future risk to be. Why? That's probably a pun. Because if you think it'll be very fast to transition something, you're going to more likely delay that transition in favor of the higher priority assets, the ones that are expected to take much longer. And so you don't want to get stuck in this position where you've started migrating something, it's taking longer than you expected, bam, now a cryptographically relevant quantum computer's in the way, and you have very real risk you're facing. So you don't want to end up in that scenario. And my cautions here are transitions are complicated, or they can be complicated. So by doing this posture assessment, you get clarity on exactly what is required to transition these assets. Maybe you're going to have vendor and supplier issues you got to deal with. Maybe there's interoperability you need to maintain. Maybe you're dealing with some legacy system that nobody's touched since Joe retired 15 years ago. Maybe system dependencies can add a lot of complications to this. Maybe there's particular resources or skills you need to migrate these things. So by, again, doing this posture assessment, you can identify these blockers and you can plan for them well in advance, because you don't want to be stuck in one of these bad situations. And the last one here I will mention is the collapse time, denoted Z in English. So this is the time until a cryptographically relevant quantum computer actually emerges. And what I'm saying here is the worse you overestimate Z, the more you can expect your future risk to be. Why? Because if you think you have more time, you're going to take more time. So if one suddenly appears a decade before you thought it was going to be, well, you're going to have a lot of things that are still in the process of being migrated or which you haven't started migrating yet. So my cautions here are Z is impossible to predict. Nobody can predict this perfectly. So the best we can do is heed expert best estimates and keep up with the news, keep up with the advancements. It behooves every security leader to understand what is the state of the art, at least in spirit, in terms of quantum computing, because you need to understand when do we think one of these things is going to come around. Now, a couple more things very, very quickly. Most of it is this recap. So organizations need to make a decision about when and how they transition to PQC. Effectively, these are cyber risk management decisions. To make a good cyber risk management decision, you need good data. Generally, this all comes about and it is acted upon through cybersecurity posture management. Unfortunately, people aren't managing their cryptography in their security postures. So what do? We need to start managing our cryptographic postures. How do we do that? Well, it starts with visibility. It starts with doing a posture assessment. And alongside that, on top of that, you need to heed and understand these expert recommendations on how to do a PQC migration and when is this cryptography breaking quantum computer going to appear. Now, the last thing I'm going to say here, I have no idea how long this has gone, I hope shortly. I think one of the big mistakes that people make when they think about quantum readiness is intuitively, they think of the whole journey A to Z. They think of starting today and getting to that quantum safe end state. And that's a mistake. I think people get overwhelmed with it and they just block it off. It's like when you have too much homework, you're like, I'm not actually going to do any of it. I've got 10 assignments, none of it's getting done. So that overwhelming is a problem. Good problem solving happens when you break problems down piece by piece. Start by understanding your risk. Where are you today? From there, go and make intelligent decisions. Also, I didn't mention, I'm not good at hawking our wares. ISARA, we do cryptographic posture assessment, post-quantum cryptography. You want to talk more about that? Hey, talk to me, send me an email. Merci beaucoup. Thank you so much for your time. I'll talk to y'all later.
Thank you for such a structured presentation. I was going to say, risk is a probabilistic term, but at the end, you became quite instrumental in terms of this is exactly what you should do to get a sense of what the number is.
Read those reports.
Yes, thanks. Okay, and the next company is evolutionQ, and it's presented by Tony Rosati. Tony, please. Tony is a vice president of product strategy and business development at evolutionQ, leading the deployment of cutting-edge quantum-safe technologies. A distinguished fellow of the Center for Applied Cryptographic Research at the University of Waterloo, he brings extensive expertise in applied cryptography and telecommunications to the quantum security landscape. I'm so glad Tony agreed to come in person to talk to us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Tony.
Oh, yeah, good morning, everyone. So I'm going to go a little deeper into the what's happening with the evolution of quantum safe networks. And I apologize in advance for the acronym soup that you're about to see. But at evolutionQ, we build key management systems that are quantum safe. We also do consulting with companies in this quantum transition. Okay, so for an agenda, I'm going to first talk about the ultimate goal of quantum safe networks, what the challenges are today, and I'll give you a view of what's happening in the standards, because you can't just, introduce post-quantum cryptography, but then you have to build them into standards before you can deploy them. I'll describe, some real quantum safe networks that we're working on, and talk a little bit about what hybrid cryptography is, and then I'll summarize. Okay, so what is the goal? Well, the goal is cryptographic resiliency. I think you've heard this from Bruno and from Martin. And that's really three components. One is cryptographic agility, so the ability to quickly adapt. If there's a break or an algorithm gets deprecated over time, which always happens, we want to be able to change the crypto suite. TLS and IPsec kind of offers that ability, and I'll show you that in a second. The second leg is defense in depth, which Martin talked about, and that is combining different cryptographic techniques. So, 10 years, multi-factor authentication is a great example. 10 years ago, we only used passwords. Well, now, for critical applications, you use two-factor authentication. You get a code on your phone and type it in. But there's lots of examples of defense in depth. In enterprise networks, we use firewalls, intrusion detection, VPN tunnels. All these are pieces of defense in depth. And then finally, long-term security. And this is this notion of harvest now, decrypt later, right? So you can harvest the traffic, and at some point, when there's a cryptographically relevant quantum computer or a cryptographic break, you can decrypt that traffic. And you could solve that with either pre-shared keys or quantum key distribution, which I'll again talk about in a second. So it's cryptographic resiliency. That's what we're after. And in terms of the technologies, quantum safe technologies, we have PQC. So NIST has introduced 3 standards so far. 2 are digital signatures, and 1 is a key agreement mechanism, so CAM. The reason there's an urgency now is that they've made an announcement that ECC and RSA will be deprecated by 2030. That's only 5 years away, and then disallowed by 2035. So we really need to start moving along this transition. But PQC is still vulnerable to computational attacks, and not just quantum computers, but computational attacks. And so we know that public key cryptography is not long-term secure. Over time, key sizes get larger and larger and larger. PQC key sizes are at least an order of magnitude larger than ECC and RSA. The next piece is quantum key distribution. So this is based on quantum physics, really nice technology. It offers information theoretic security. This was invented by Gilles Bressard and Bennett. Bressard is at University of Montreal. But it's very expensive. It requires specialized hardware, only works for optical networks of limited distance. And it does work over free space satellite, QKD, but we don't have that yet. We're still a couple of years away from QKD satellites. And then finally, symmetric key cryptography, which doesn't get talked about a lot. Symmetric key, we use it every day. Every mobile device has a symmetric key that authenticates you to the carrier's network. But we also use it in telecom networks. Nokia has symmetric key, quantum safe key distribution in their networks. So it's used today, but nobody really talks about it. It's an old technology. It predates public key crypto. But it's quantum safe, and we use it today. Okay, so the NSA publishes this timeline, the suggested transition. And the transition starts now. We have the standards and they give you timelines for when you should start transitioning. The challenge here is we have to build crypto into standards. Okay, so here's a view of at the IETF. These are the protocols, security protocols that we use every day that's built into your browser or VPN tunnels, etc. Everything on the left is our standards that need to be touched to update these standards for PQC. Everything on the right uses these other base core standards. So TLS is the one you're probably familiar with. And CMS, IPsec, these are all things that need to be updated so your browsers work and so on to be PQC ready. So the LAMPS working group works on digital signatures. In fact, a couple guys here at Entrust. Sorry for the slide, seems to be a little corrupted, but they're making great progress on this. We already have almost RFCs for all the digital signature formats, which includes MLDSA and hybrid. So hybrid meaning a DSA signature, MLDSA plus a classical scheme like ECC or RSA. And so this is moving along well. In terms of TLS, we have a submission that exists, but it has not been adopted yet. And the submission is based on hybrid, a hybrid crypto, meaning a hybrid key agreement like MLChem plus a classical like ECDSA or RSA. And so that exists. And I'll give you a picture of what that looks like. So with TLS 1.3, this image is just the key agreement. What we do is we combine MLChem and EC-Diffie-Hellman. So we're actually doing two key agreements, and these are both ephemeral, like so they're make up private key and distribute public key. And then we have an optional an external PSK. So you can add an external pre-shared key. So this hybrid approach, you put this in a KDF and that's your session key. Surprisingly, this already exists in most browsers. So Google, AWS already support this in production. And I checked, you look at your Chrome browser, you're using hybrid, you're potentially using hybrid cryptography to certain websites. So despite that, the RC has not been adopted yet, you're actually using it. And you'll see that I believe it will be adopted this year because of the PQC standards weren't really launched until August last year. Now we talked about cryptographic agility. TLS offers an example that you have three orthogonal choices, right? So you pick your key agreement method, you pick your authentication method, and then you pick your encryption and hashing function. Now there's only one mandatory, it's AES 128 and ECDH and ECDSA. So the question is, if there's a catastrophic break, how quickly can you switch? The assumption with TLS is that you have lots of time, right? The idea is that, okay, you deprecate a standard and then 5 years later, after a lot of testing, we can switch. Well, that may not be the case in a catastrophic break. Okay, so I wanted to just kind of introduce this concept of hybrid key exchanges and hybrid authenticated key exchanges, because you will be using them in all your browsers and VPN tunnels. And that is the idea of combining different cryptographic schemes to make the overall scheme stronger. So classical public key crypto, PQC, PSK, or quantum key distribution. And you combine these all in a key derivation function, and you have a much more secure defense in depth approach. Authenticated implies that you have some long-term secret that's embedded in there, like a pre-shared key, a static private public key pair, or a certificate. So there is a standard. ETSI has a hybrid hybrid key exchange standard, and that is that format of classical plus post-quantum crypto plus PSK, and the PSK could be quantum key distribution. And so this is already out there. It's been around for at least a couple years now. Okay, so when do we use hybrid crypto? Well, you want to use it for in any situation that requires long-term security. So, for example, code signing, where you're signing root of trust in, say, some semiconductor. You want something that will last a long time, because in some cases you cannot update that software. And so if it's long-lived, you want to use hybrid. In cases where you have devices in the field that can't be updated very frequently, especially IoT, automotive, they never update certificates. Once there's a root, it's there forever. This is the time where you really want to use hybrid crypto. Okay, so let me just switch to some networks, some real networks that we're working on. And so in this case, there's 4 nodes. 2 are using quantum key distribution, so they're within about 100 kilometers of each other. And 2 nodes are too far apart to use QKD. And so we're using the combination of hybrid PQC plus QKD. That way, you can scale out the network. It's also used to back up, hybrid PQC is used to back up QKD, because with QKD, a QKD pair is about $200,000. There's no hot standby, so you need to have a backup for QKD. Great examples, we work very closely with Nokia, and we do exactly this. Nokia provides the backup for any QKD, and that's a requirement in a telco environment. And then finally, QKD offers a transition strategy. These hybrids offer this transition where, in this case, the customer actually wants to deploy a full QKD network with satellite QKD, but we won't see that for 2 years. So they can transition right now to a quantum safe network this way. Okay, so I mentioned PSK a number of times in these hybrids. Well, how do you manage the PSK? Every security protocol in every layer has the ability to accept a pre-shared key, but how do you manage it? And so the traditional key distribution center approach is you have this random number generator, it's key distribution center, and you just send a symmetric key, one to Alice, one to Bob, using a key encrypted key. That is the old school way of doing symmetric key distribution. But this has to be designed very carefully because there's all kinds of potential attacks, including denial of service and so on. Nokia has a wonderful solution in this domain that's quantum safe. So there are new symmetric key infrastructure protocols that are emerging. We have one at evolutionQ called multimodal. It's an open protocol. You can read our white paper. We have a security proof for this. But what we're doing here is Alice and Bob eventually just do a simple hybrid, right, with a classical post-quantum chem and a PSK. And the PSKs are managed by a key distribution hub where the initiator gets a piece of pre-key data to generate that pre-shared key in the final computation for the hybrid. And this offers a lot of great security guarantees. It's long-term secure, perfect forward secrecy, post-quantum, post-compromise security. So this is one approach to a modern approach to symmetric key distribution, but it does combine both, right? Classical and post-quantum. Okay, so we have to look at in terms of the acceptance of hybrid cryptography around the world. And as it turns out, most countries allow hybrids. The EU requires it. In fact, if you're using, because these technologies like QKD and PQC are fairly new, so they're worried about this transition time. Like, at what point can we really trust these protocols? QKD is nice, but there's lots of side channel attacks. And so they want to hybridize. They always want to hybridize the final session key. So most countries allow it. Curiously, the NSA doesn't recommend it. They don't disallow it, but so they seem to be on the fence about hybrid cryptography. Not sure why, but in reality, it's being used in the field. So just to summarize, I just wanted to be, just to let you know what's happening in the standards. You are actually using hybrid cryptography today. It offers the greatest resiliency, cryptographic resiliency in our networks. And we're beginning to build hybrid crypto into our large-scale networks for scalability, reliability, and resiliency. So thank you for your time, and we'll hand it off to you.
Okay, so we're moving forward. Our next speaker is Rajat Ghosh from the National Quantum Strategy. Good to see you. Welcome. Yeah. Rajat is a manager of the National Quantum Strategy Secretariat at the Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada. But Dr. Ghosh has received his PhD in experimental quantum physics from Princeton in 2009, where he helped pioneer advances in quantum sensors, including for use in navigation, remote detection, tests of fundamental physics, and brain imaging. He spent time in medical science and medical physics. In 2018, he joined Innovation, Science and Development Canada as a senior policy advisor, where he has helped develop, coordinate, and implement Canada's national quantum strategy. So we're moving now in a little bit of a policy domain now, and moving into security.
I want to thank the organizers for having me today. We've heard a lot about the risks related to quantum technologies, so I will acknowledge those, but I also want to talk a little bit about the opportunities, just to give everyone a little bit of a smile so early in the morning. So, as you're likely aware, quantum technologies are related to or exploit the behavior at the atomic scale. It's the science of the small. These are envisioned to have fundamental and foundational changes and disruption to a number of sectors, including finance, transportation, drug development, and pharmacy. That's one of the reasons why they're impactful and that they're important. We expect that by 2045, this sector will grow to be about 150 billion US. If Canada achieves or is able to rein in even 8% of the global market share, that'll create over 150,000 jobs in Canada alone. And just for reference, usually in tech traffic, we do better than 8%. So these figures are modest. Whether they're accurate or not, the point is that they're large, so we should take note of the opportunity. Now, judging by this opportunity, it's been recognized both by the government of Canada, but by the business community alike. The last decade, the government of Canada has invested $1.2 billion in this sector, and we've seen comparable investments by the Canadian business. So those investments have created strengths, and those strengths go from coast to coast. We have strengths in British Columbia, Alberta, Ontario, as well as Quebec. Now, originally, as many of the speakers this morning have already mentioned, these strengths started in the university community. They then expanded to small-scale startups. Some of those startups have now scaled. We now have companies in Canada, valuations of over 100 million, some over $1 billion. So the sector is growing quite rapidly. We even have a quantum consortium, which coordinates all of the industrial activity in Canada. So today we have over 100 companies in our ecosystem. I think 119 the last I checked. This is, I think, a few years old, but we have around 3,000 people that are employed in the sector. But what I should really point out is that we are world leading. So we actually have the second highest number of quantum computing startups in the world. So recognizing all of this, what can all of us do together to help this sector grow? Threat is one thing, but threat doesn't always motivate people to act, which is unfortunate, but that's the stick. Are there carrots too? So the first step along that path, at least for the government, was to announce the National Quantum Strategy. So the National Quantum Strategy had three basic aims. First, to communicate Canada's long-term commitment to this sector and to grow it. Now, the reason why this is fundamentally important is that, as many speakers have talked about today, even with PQC, the development of these types of technologies takes a long time, talking about multi-years, sometimes decades. So unless there's an appropriate signal indicating that there's a long-term commitment, it's very difficult to crowd in investment. Second, to highlight that investment, basically cheer it. But most importantly, what we're trying to do is to concentrate on areas of strength. There's a number of different quantum technologies we could focus on. There's a number of problems we could tackle, but the most effective way is to concentrate our activities and our investment in areas where Canada has strength and to double down. So even though this is a Government of Canada strategy, I do want to iterate that this is done in collaboration with industry and academia. We have a Quantum Advisory Council that advises on this with members from academia, leading thought leaders from industry. They've helped us develop roadmaps to identify priorities, milestones, and actions to develop and advance on all of our quantum missions. Which is really why we're here today. We're here today to talk about quantum communications. That's one of the missions that's been highlighted. Now that has two parts to it. Really, it's to ensure the privacy and cybersecurity of Canadians. And it's broken into two distinct solutions. One quantum solution through the development of a national quantum communications network. And this is more of a long-term goal. But we need to be able to ensure the cybersecurity of Canadians in the short term as well. Well, the short term and beyond, we'll say. And that is through the development of post-quantum cryptography. Now, these missions, again, are really a collaboration between industry, academia, not-for-profits, and government. No, we don't believe that any one sector has all the necessary tools or resources to succeed on their own. Now, what we hope to do with these missions is de-risk the technology to scale up solutions so that they can actually be deployable in the field for everyone that needs it. Now, the National Quantum Strategy began with a very meager investment of $360 million. To win this race, you need billions of dollars. But there was a very distinct reason for going in small. It's to coordinate all the necessary elements. You can see, I'm not going to go through all the different programs, but we had initial investments in research, talent, and commercialization. But there's a number of other organizations that have to play with us in order to get this to work. And we've seen even with that small $360 million investment, which was more of a signal, we've been able to crowd in or coordinate with other organizations that didn't receive the money. I didn't highlight all of them, but other government agencies such as Communications Security Establishment, Department of Defense, other banks, Business Development Bank of Canada, and a number of other private institutions. We've all agreed that if we row the boat in the same direction, we can go farther. Now, I do want to stress that this is a whole of government approach. Although the National Quantum Strategy is being led out of Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada, we work closely with our partners across the government. So, for example, the Department of Defense has released their own departmental strategy, that's Quantum 2030, which as you can imagine, makes references to adopting quantum safe technologies. In 2018, CSC released the National Cybersecurity Strategy. I will let them speak to anything because they're in the room. I think they go after me. But this even goes towards legislation. This is more of the stick approach. So Bill C-26, which did not go through due to prorogation of government, but it had proposed amendments to the Telecommunications Act to advance the cybersecurity requirements for Canadians or for telecommunications networks. So to support this, and I apologize for the laundry list, so we'll get to something a little bit more structured very soon. These have to be approved by about 10 different committees before I can present them to you. So I'm sorry, even the font is highly contested. But, so initially, so we have a number of programs to support quantum communications and the advancement of quantum safe solutions such as post-quantum cryptography. Just to highlight a few, we've supported the KeySat project. That's the demonstration of quantum key distribution via satellite. I think our last speaker alluded to that. Not only that, the NRC has their own challenge program to develop some of the future components required for quantum key distribution. We don't necessarily have the most efficient quantum repeaters at the moment. We have Innovative Solutions Canada to procure quantum solutions and to help offset the development of quantum prototypes in areas where they could give use to the government. We also have given money to a number of companies to help them develop their own quantum solutions and to act as test beds. So I think recently, I'm not going to go through all of them, but Numana received some money to develop a quantum test bed in Quebec for quantum communications. Well, what is the goal of all of this? Well, I'll start with the goal that you're likely more interested in, and that's to assure the long-term cyber resilience of the Canadian economy. So one way to do that is by post-quantum cryptography. Now, there's a number of steps. We think of this as long-term because, as many people have mentioned, the migration, the development of these technologies, even if you had it completely solved today, it would still take time to migrate. It's not an immediate process. So we at NQS Strategy Secretary would hope for this to be completed in the broader Canadian ecosystem, so industrial players, by the 2030s. We understand there's a number of steps. First, standardization. NIST is taking the first steps towards that, not across every relevant quantum cryptographic piece of the toolkit, but among some of the most important. We need protocol and vendor support, and we need to be able to update certification programs. Now, in order to detail what other steps we need to do, what the government should prioritize, what industry can contribute to, we've undergone nationwide consultations with key stakeholders and experts in the field. They've raised a number of challenges and opportunities at the same point. One is to raise the awareness of cryptographically relevant quantum computing. I don't think I have to sell very much in this room, but going to other audiences, whenever you mention the word cryptographically relevant quantum computer, they think, oh, that's decades away. Science fiction, I don't even have to think about that. They don't necessarily have the mindset of, perhaps I should be cataloging my data assets, determining what is mission critical and what needs a higher level of security. So this is one part. Another is actually the testing, development, and standardization of the PQC toolkit, and actually the adoption and other cybersecurity protocols, and the non-trivial task of migrating this to cryptographic systems. Now, there's a number of challenges, the global migration, technical implementation, vendor support, I would say, has been a bit of a challenge. And we have a number of vendors in the room. The question is whether we have a capability now to create enough products for broader Canadian industry. So this would be the industry pull. If industrial players request or ask their cryptographic vendors, are you PQC compliant? When do you plan to be PQC compliant? That can start pushing and start growing the sector very rapidly. Without that, it is quite challenging. We all have some products, but we don't necessarily have, if we were to see a quantum computer today that was cryptographically relevant, would we be able to distribute all the required PQC hardware? So it's not only software to all the relevant players. I think that would be challenging. So I think one way to do that is actually to try to incentivize players outside, so end users outside of the government, outside of the PQC developers to start requesting this. So what should we do going forward? Well, our consultations have indicated a number of things. So beyond the PQC standardization and digital signature schemes, we also have to develop manufacturing capacity for PQC. We want to make sure that if you want to ensure the cyber resilience of Canadians, of the Canadian economy, we want to make sure that we have an intact supply chain. As you can imagine, lately, the geopolitical world has evolved. So we need to ensure that we can have as much of the supply chain embedded with ourselves and trusted allies. We also have to ensure that we can transition non-government Canada systems to post-quantum cryptography. I won't speak about government Canada systems, as CSC will speak later. Now, there's a second part of this, which is a little bit more opportunity-based. Now, we talked about PQC a lot today. The last speaker highlighted QKD. So the use of actually exploiting the advantages of quantum technologies and quantum mechanics to create provably secure networks. Now, where I put this? This is not as advanced as PQC. So this is more of a long-term goal to be able to have this capability. So what we would like to do is to develop a national test bed. This is what we have been told, or this is what's been highlighted to us as something of critical importance. And we say national test bed, we mean not only fiber optic cables we've heard earlier today, but having that combined with satellite. Now we've talked a lot today about depth of security. We would imagine something like this to be integrated with PQC. This would not be a standalone system. Now, beyond this, this could, as we've talked about, this could create secure communications, but what is the market of that? Now, yes, we can talk about some secure industries, but maybe some telecommunications, maybe banks, maybe government, but you want to be able to grow your market as much as possible. Now, the advantage of quantum communications is that there are applications beyond secure communication. One, for instance, without going through all of them, could use this to network quantum computers. What can that do? That could, again, shave off the development time of quantum computers. Instead of having one really large quantum computer that's powerful, in layman's terms, you could network together 10 small ones. That has applications, that has immediate applications. You can network together quantum sensors to actually be able to detect things more accurately, more efficiently. So there's advantages of this as well. But in order to develop all this, you want the business community developing use cases. And that's why we think developing use cases can help grow the sector. But that's also something that's essential, that although not directly related to the adoption of quantum safe technologies, it goes hand in hand with de-risking some of this and helping to crowd in other sources of investment and funding. So how do we do this? Well, we need to address some of the technical barriers to quantum networking. We have a satellite that is planned to go, planned to launch. The date keeps being pushed back, so I'm not going to commit to any hard dates. But we're still in the process of developing some of the fundamental tech. Quantum repeaters. We've identified a priority for developing use cases. In Canada, we don't work alone. We work with our trusted allies. So we want to ensure any system that we develop, and this can apply to PQC as well, is interoperable with those of our allies. We also want to ensure that we reduce supply chain gaps and manufacture as many of the system components as we can in Canada. Another piece which isn't always talked about, we heard a lot about full stack solutions today, or complete or PQC solutions. Another business strategy is integrating into the supply chain. You don't have to build an entire product that solves it. If you can build one widget that's very important and crucial that can be integrated into a larger cryptographic toolkit or something like QKD, you see that as a near-term opportunity as well. So some of the key challenges are coordination. This isn't only a Government of Canada issue. This is also with industry, other players, other governments, standards bodies, for example. There's a number of technical challenges as well. So what action should we prioritize? Well, first, to develop the business cases, we have to create a test bed. We see one of the first test beds as being intercity linked. We see it having global components with attachments to satellites. We see some parts being fiber optic based, some parts not. We want to be able to ensure, though, that whatever success we have accrues to Canadians. So we have to be able to develop a way to anchor Canadian companies here. If we're putting substantial investment, we want to allow Canadian companies the opportunity to grow within Canada. Would they have operations elsewhere? I'm sure they will. But we want to make sure that they have at least an opportunity, there's no impediment to it. So what are the next steps? Well, we're continuing the rollout of our national quantum strategy, and we're considering future investment. We mentioned earlier, 360 million is a meager amount. We're very aware of how much it takes to play in this game and to succeed. We know that we have strength, and we know that there's a real potential for the technologies. We are actively engaging end users and trying to help further the adoption of quantum technologies. And I include PQC in that, even though it is not a traditional quantum technology, because I view it as it's very hard to tell the story otherwise. And we want to work with like-minded partners. So I think I'll leave it there. And thank you for your time.
Getting interesting, the presentation really touched on adoption things, what really is, really to the point of adoption. And another very interesting aspects about that quantum safe technologies are not just about protection. They are innovation enabling. They enable other things to happen in quantum computing. Okay, and continue with the next speaker, Nicholas Scott from the Canadian Center for Cybersecurity. He's manager of cryptographic engagement and standards. Nicholas is a seasoned professional with over 20 years of experience in cybersecurity practices and development. He currently serves as the manager of the cryptographic engagement and standards at the Canadian Center for Cybersecurity. He has been instrumental in advancing cybersecurity initiatives within the communications security establishment, leveraging his extensive expertise to enhance national security.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thanks very much for having me. I understand that I am the only thing standing between you and the coffee break, so I will do my very best to keep this moving as quickly as I can. As we mentioned earlier, there'll be the panel later for questions, so we'll try to do that later. Yeah, as introduced here, I am from the Canadian Center for Cybersecurity. We're the first stop for things in government related to cybersecurity. We work with government, with private sector, and we help people minimize the potential for potential cyber events. So cyber attacks, other kinds of cyber threats. And then on the other side of that, after folks have deployed things, we also work with certain groups to detect and notify of potential cyber events. So we have a vast array of systems that we can use to detect ongoing threats, and we work with critical infrastructure and other government entities to ensure that they're notified as soon as possible when a potential attack is underway. So yeah, we are also the technical authority for cryptography for the Government of Canada. We have a huge team of different cryptographic researchers who are regularly analyzing protocols and different systems to make sure that we're able to provide the best guidance to Canadians and to the rest of the government of Canada. So specifically talking about the Cyber Center mandate, we have a mandate to keep the GC communications secure. So that's where we talk about our ComSec and secure communications between government entities. We provide advice and guidance across a number of domains. We've got, like as mentioned, critical infrastructure, government departments, and then select groups that choose to sign up with us and ask us for that kind of assistance. So yeah, we publish regular guidance. I have a list of specific documents we've published over the last few years at the end of the deck here, but any number of cybersecurity related topics can be found on our website as well. Yeah, engage with industry, discussing different crypto products. A number of people in the room here, I've not had the chance to meet face to face, but I've definitely engaged in a number of emails with some of you in the room here. So yeah, lots of familiar names I see on the attendance list here. And then finally, yeah, just to mention, we do engage with international standards bodies to make sure that the standards that are being set, being fixed, do align with the Government of Canada's priorities and meet with all of our needs as well. This slide here is basically the meat of why we're here today. I will confess here that this is probably one of the least technical talks you'll hear today, but we are. I'm going to present to you what we're doing in Government of Canada, how we're doing our rollout, or what the plans are for transition here. So Cyber Center works with NIST. We conduct research, we do analysis of different algorithms, different protocols. We share those findings with NIST, and so we find our work also folds into the NIST publications as well. So we saw the publication or the releases of FIPS 203, 204, 205 from NIST earlier, well, I guess mid last year. So our work was also folded into that. We also share efforts with NIST with our CMVP, so cryptographic module verification or validation program. So we're working with the industry as well to validate different systems to make sure they align with these standards that are rolled out. Yeah, so mentioned that. But yeah, so we've got vendors after the August release of those FIPS publications. Vendors are now implementing these into protocols and different devices worldwide. So I guess the question comes like, where are we today, and what are we looking at? Cyber Center is working closely with yeah, so Cyber Center is working with TBS and Shared Services Canada. So TBS being the Treasury Board Secretariat. They're the ones that kind of manage all the money for the Government of Canada. Shared Services Canada is one of the largest, probably the largest, I don't want to call it like CIO, but they're responsible for the vast number of systems across a number of different government departments. So working with them, hoping to get kind of maximum coverage with using SSC as our first kind of test bed, not test bed. Sorry, better choice of words there. As our first kind of rollout to get post-quantum implementations out onto systems across the Government of Canada. One of the challenges we have here is we talk about Cyber Center making recommendations, so we provide advice and guidance, but we actually don't have a stick, for lack of a better term. We don't have the ability to mandate government to do specific things. So this is part of why we're working together with Treasury Board, because they are the stick. They're the ones providing the funding to each of the other departments. And how we're working together here is Cyber Center will be issuing a guidance document that is intended basically for Government of Canada departments. It will also inform industry and the rest of the public what our timelines are, where we're looking to go with that. And TBS then will be able to implement policy that will impose deadlines across the rest of government to roll out or to transition to quantum safe technologies. Yeah, one of the big things here, we want to make sure that we're aligning with our international partners. I saw Rajat had slides up there with the maybe it wasn't him. Sorry, somebody had a slide up earlier that was talking about here's what Australia is doing, here's what the US is doing, and NCSC in the UK, what they have. So we will be following suit with our own guidance, and that will be published hopefully soon. It's one of the things that we're working on now, but again, it's a coordination piece across the broader government. There's a lot of moving parts to make sure that we are setting realistic deadlines for all of government, but also protecting Canadians' data, Canadian information. So yeah, one of the things I made a couple notes here I wanted to add on here, like Philip's comments earlier this morning about risk, that really kind of hit home here. That is one of the big things that we are looking at here, right? It's evaluating like how long do we need to store this data, how long and how much can we wait to get this stuff out? The answer is we can't. The time is now to start making those transitions. The risk calculus there is something that we'll have to figure out as we do our inventory. So, and one of the other big steps, and this will fall mostly to SSC with guidance and support from Cyber Center. How do we do that inventory in a complete and total way to make sure that we've kind of caught every quantum, every system that's at risk from a quantum computing or a quantum attack. So a lot of moving parts here. We are working hard to get those publications out, get that guidance out so that everybody can kind of see where we're at with this. But our CMVP is ready to start taking modules from vendors, from industry who are looking to get that validation. Had good conversations with them the last couple of weeks to make sure that everything's ready. So when this publication comes out and hopefully kind of spurs things into action a little bit more concretely, they're ready to take in industry's requests for their validation. So that's kind of where I'm at with the process in Government Canada. We've pushed out a number of documents here. The meat here is not so much the slides, but the hyperlinks that are here. I'm assuming the slides will be shared out after. But anyway, you can go to cyber.gc.ca and look up any of these documents that are easily accessible both in English and French. Yeah, and I will be, I'm the first to admit I am not a mathematician by training, so I will direct questions to the cryptography distribution list. We've got a number of people here that can answer those questions, any technical questions or any requests for guidance or anything there. So that'll be all. And I guess with that, I'll turn it back over to Sonia for next comments. Thank you.
Okay, so I think the publications of the Cybersecurity Center of Canada were quite influential. The moment we decided in February, they came up with this document about preparedness, which was an additional motivation for us to go ahead with the program. Okay, so so far so good. We have now the half an hour break. The presentation were going a little bit more efficiently than we expected. So we have now nice half an hour. There is more coffee, there are new cookies and other things to nibble. So please enjoy. We'll be back here at 11:20. I'll remind you when the time comes. Okay, so go ahead. Our next speaker is Koray. He is from the National Research Council of Canada, leading the cryptography and quantum computing team at NRC. He's also a joint professor at the University of Waterloo. Koray's research focuses on the design of cryptographic algorithms and protocols. His key interests are in post-quantum cryptography, secure biometrics and the interplay between machine learning and cryptography. Sorry.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon, and I hope you enjoy the coffee in the break. So my objective today is really to provide you with an overview of NRC, how we have those mechanisms to engage with different stakeholders, industry, academics, and also like other government departments. I'll try to take a top-down approach. Like as you see, I'm from the National Research Council of Canada. NRC has several research centers. And my research center is Digital Technologies Research Center, and each research center has several research and development teams. And my team is cryptography and quantum computing team. So I'll start from NRC, zoom into DT, Digital Technologies, and also like two other research teams like I'll talk about. One team is cybersecurity research team, and my team cryptography and quantum computing team. So after this overview, I'm also hoping that we'll get more interaction and engagement either today or afterwards. And I'll provide some key contacts so that you can reach out either through me or directly, or you can search on the web for NRC or DT web pages. So that towards adopting those like quantum technologies and post-quantum cryptography, maybe NRC will also be helpful either through research collaborations or other means with industry, academia, and companies and other government departments. So let's switch the slide.
The right one.
Yes.
You just clicked off the screen, that's all.
Please ignore the man at the screen.
Now do it.
Thank you. Okay, National Research Council of Canada. So there are really three ways that we are trying to advance and like deliver value to Canada. And again, like these are of course like not isolated, they all interact and then like engage with one another. But most likely on the left-hand side, this is more to the research side of the things and maybe mostly of interest to either researchers or companies with research interests. And on the right-hand side, that's more on the business innovation side. I'll talk about those two different streams, but of course, like in between those, like we are also trying to support the government policies and provide some expertise or like guidance through our technical expertise. And then through my slides, you are going to be seeing some highlights. So if you want to ignore anything else, maybe just look at the highlighted items. On the left-hand side, as I said, this is more on the research side of the things. We utilize our expertise through different research centers and then different research teams under those research centers. We have several of those. And of course, this research is a wide scope from very maybe low technology readiness level to high. And as you go higher, of course, like from those publications, you go towards maybe intellectual property generation, licensing revenues, so on and so forth. And our engagement is with universities, academia, companies, so on and so forth. And our interaction is also at the international level. I'll talk about those things later. But then NRC has its own collaborative and research programs. I'll talk about those things in detail. And then we do file patents and then we license them or we generate them for either NRC or for the clients that we are working for. All that. We do have grants and contributions through different and many challenge programs NRC is hosting. I'll talk about some of those things. So this could be a really good opportunity for SMEs in particular, and also for universities or research groups, because these are really wide open to any partner in Canada, but also sometimes partially to international partners. Okay, so this is just to show that we are really at big scale, but of course, that comes with many other priorities too. But I'll talk specifically about what these numbers could mean for post-quantum cryptography and its transition or adoption in the near term. Again, you can skip those big details, but some of the highlighted items could be of interest to you or to your group, because I think mostly probably these are the most relevant things to post-quantum cryptography in terms of the technology, hardware, software, and application side. So in particular, transportation is one of the big application areas. And now nanotechnologies, digital twinning, cybersecurity is all built into those applications and systems. And my research center in particular is Digital Technologies Research Center. So it's all about digital technologies, including AI and machine learning technologies. So NRC, as every other institution, has their own priority and strategic planning. And this is, by the way, like a public resource. You can just type NRC strategic plan 24-29. You can read it in details, but the important thing here is you really have currently for this like 24-29 planning, you have 4 research priorities. And again, most likely the most relevant parts are on the quantum and digital priority and on the foundational research. So the digital priority is more on the AI and ML side of the things. But of course, like with the safe AI, secure AI, cybersecurity, and post-quantum cryptography makes an essential connection to it. And on the quantum side, it is on the quantum computing, quantum algorithms, and of course, you know, with the transition, you can come to quantum and post-quantum technologies as well. So, and these are big umbrellas. Of course, you know, you can make a connection through other priorities too. But just to give you a focus, like really those two are the key for today's, I think, focus. Okay, so this is more on the business and innovation side of the things. NRC is highly collaborative institute. As I said, like we collaborate with universities, academics, researchers, international partners, academia, other government departments. In this case, there is another very good vehicle that we utilize to engage with companies, which is the IRAP, Industrial Research Assistance Program, that does provide funding to companies. So IRAP is established through their ITAs, and these are technology advisors that they have their own portfolio, and then they are the mechanism to connect small, medium enterprises to NRC and researchers at NRC. And again, like, you know, I can tell you more about those things, but this is one way of really engaging with NRC to maybe complement, you know, leverage expertise and collaborate. And of course, like after those, there are different types of engagement. You can engage through an international opportunity. You can engage through a very local opportunity on a one-on-one basis. It doesn't have to be hugely collaborative, but in the end, you know, we see really a good production of research, publications, and also like licensed technologies. These are some numbers that can just indicate the large scale of NRC's footprint in Canada. And now it's time to really zoom into my research center, Digital Technologies Research Center, and then I'll zoom into our 2 research teams, in particular cybersecurity and cryptography and quantum computing. So digital technologies, as the name suggests, is all about innovative digital technologies, and then through, of course, not just innovative, but also ethical and safe and secure use of those technologies, we try to improve the society at large. And again, like post-quantum becomes an essential part of those things, because as we are digitalizing lots of sectors, we have several challenge programs in digitalization for AI, digitalization of construction sectors, so on and so forth. And we are largely involved with AI safety research initiatives led through ISAT. And then we come to those things through, again, the engagement of our researchers at the very bottom scale through at different levels. So this is about DT. Again, like DT, as NRC's large research centers are also at large scale. And this is just to show you some numbers about our expertise and the researchers and other developers that we have in-house. As I mentioned, each research center has their research and development teams. In DT, we currently have 9 research teams, and these are the names. And I highlighted 2 of them. It doesn't mean that, you know, PQC doesn't, you know, engage with other teams, but most likely, like cybersecurity and cryptography and quantum computing team are at the core of this post-quantum cryptography, and we would love to talk to others and connect with others to really help with the adoption of those technologies. And as you see, there's also a big footprint in AI ML technologies. I'll also tell you how the connection can be made from post-quantum cryptography to other side technologies. I'll provide some concrete examples as I see personally. But one of the key challenge programs that we have in DT is the Applied Quantum Computing Challenge Program. Again, there's lots of information online. We expect a new call to come to support quantum computing under this program soon, hopefully. But you can also, watch this over the internet on AQC has its own webpage to disseminate this information. We do have several collaboration centers. So one of the ways we collaborate with academia mostly is through our collaboration centers located at on-campus universities. I am in particular in Waterloo. Most of my team members are in Waterloo, and then we engage a lot with University of Waterloo, the Perimeter Institute, IQC, so on and so forth. We have several other collaboration centers on other university campuses. And two of those centers do focus on cybersecurity and IoT security and artificial intelligence and cybersecurity. As I said, we do work with SMEs, small to medium enterprises, and also other government departments and clients. Okay. Something maybe that's not so obvious is, PQC has its own core. And maybe the most critical priority now is to really focus on the encryption and digital signature technologies offered through PQC. This is also what the standardization effort has become about. Like we have seen in the morning in presentations, those CIA principles, confidentiality, integrity, and authenticity or availability. But then there's also /privacy, right? So those off-the-shelf technologies that we implement, we standardize, do solve those problems at large, maybe a high level. But when you dig down into other specific applications or problems, those standardized algorithms or protocols do not necessarily address some of those other areas. And this is very natural, of course. One example is the privacy problem, which is hand in hand with the confidentiality problem, but there are different ways of solving those problems. One of the reasons is because that becomes a lot more difficult to really apply those encryption algorithms or digital signature algorithms to solve other side problems. I'll give as one specific example is going through, addressing problems around AI safety. So when you look at AI safety, there's lots of its own sub problems, but cybersecurity and in particular post-quantum cryptography plays a key role in our opinion to meaningfully address those AI safety research, AI safety challenges in particular. And then you talk about the authenticity of your model or like training data sets or interaction of your AI model with other partners and parties and their data. Another example we've seen again, I heard in one of the presentations today, the multi-factor authentication. And we are accustomed to how to design password-based authentication protocols, but then with the high, maybe advanced use of technology, we did switch to biometric authentication, and biometric authentication really demands for the use of AI at large. But then many of the problems you assume that works very well with those standardized PQC algorithms, they don't necessarily apply to solve authentication problems, in particular biometric security, for example, because many of the assumptions you assume do not really hold anymore in that particular setting. One quick example is, for example, the entropy problem. When you're generating keys, you are free to get as many entropy as you like from your seed, but that doesn't happen for biometric because you're fixed with the entropy of the input you're providing. So you have to really play some science and art at the same time to address those problems in the quantum safeguard. So, and as I said, we do also engage in those international programs. So if as a university or as a company, you're interested in those things, please do feel free to contact, and then we can maybe brainstorm and figure out a sort of way to work together. I already talked about Applied Quantum Computing Program. Please do go ahead and search for it. Maybe there's some interest to you, and it is a great opportunity because it comes with grants and contributions, funds to support your research and development activities. So now I did mention about the collaboration centers and sites. I already told you I am in Waterloo, and our collaboration centers focuses on AI, Internet of Things, and cybersecurity. Post-quantum cryptography is absolutely a part of this collaboration center, and we do have regular programs and funds to support research. through Waterloo and NRC researchers, but we also welcome other partners. Same, the Cybersecurity Collaboration Center in NB through the Cybersecurity Research Team is just another collaboration center that we can engage under the adoption of post-quantum cryptography technologies. So now, what I'll do is I'll mention briefly maybe a couple of slides from each team. Cybersecurity Research Team, Scott Buffet is the team lead for this team, and feel free to contact him. But Cybersecurity Research Team really looks at a wide scope of technologies for cybersecurity, from detection to protection and prevention of those attacks. And there's a list of those things, not exhaustive, but they're looking at different aspects too, from digital to device to human-centric solutions. And again, like if you're really thinking of adoption of a technology, you need to have the fundamentals, foundational research, and then there's a software, hardware, device, application side of the things, but also there's a human side of the things that have to be deployed and used. And there are many constraints that need to be considered, especially in the practical deployment and adoption. This is, since I put extra slides that I'm not going to go through, but those information like you heard and the slides I shared about the center itself, projects in particular, again, like maybe aging in place is not something that you immediately think about it when you're thinking of post-quantum cryptography adoption. But again, it captures a lot of the things as the side adoption of those technologies. I'll skip the next two projects that cybersecurity team launched. And about my team in particular, we do look at the core post-quantum cryptography and security, but we also have researchers in my team looking at the quantum computing, quantum cryptography, quantum information, and also other technologies in privacy and authentication. And I have a list of those papers that we recently published. And as I said, like these are really from low technology readiness level to higher levels. In particular, 2 of those papers generated new IP for us. And again, it's not an exhaustive list, but if you search our names and then find a common interest, please do contact us as you see fit. And I'm here today too.
Well, you can see how much stuff is going on at NRC. By the way, we have had here Bel Kutsov, who is Director General of Canadian Photonics Fabrication Center at NRC. We have Maya from IRAP. So NRC is a traditional partner, a very good partner of us for many, many years in domains like emerging technologies and so on. So, and this is kind of related to our next speaker, Martin Laforest, and I loved telling this story that when we were organizing the quantum technology entrepreneurship, I connected to Pelco, I said, who at NRC I should be talking to? I said, well, talk to Phil Kay. He's associated with the advanced computing program. So I talked to Phil and I said, here's what we're trying to do. And he listened to me and said, be very careful. I said, what did I do wrong? He said, no, nothing wrong, but be careful whom you are talking to. There are very different people that pretend to understand, but many of them don't. I said, well, who should be talking to? Martin. So this is how Martin, I was introduced to Martin. He holds a PhD in quantum computing from the University of Waterloo's Institute of Quantum Computing. For 9 years, he led the quantum outreach efforts at the Quantum Computing Institute, interacting with government, industry, the media, and the public on the impact of quantum technologies. He then joined ISARA Corporation, and now he's part of Quantacet, which is probably the only incubator venture capital firm that supports and contributes to quantum technology startups. Martin?
Well, thank you. We're not probably the only, we are the only quantum investment fund. So first of all, Stoyan, thank you very much for inviting me. So I'm gonna switch gear a little bit here. And I realize that you guys are seeing my the presenter mode, so but I haven't figured out how to do it properly, but it's okay. So for the people in the room that I don't know, so the people that are not from the quantum community, I hope you realize that Stoyan has done an absolutely amazing job to get the speakers. You guys get, you get pretty much the cream of what Canada has to offer when it comes to quantum cybersecurity and quantum in general. So Stoyan, big congratulations on that. And most importantly, a big thank you for inviting me. Actually, I've been working with Stoyan for about a year now, and you mentioned it, that is the first time you prepared something was about quantum and entrepreneurship, which is kind of where I spend most of my life these days. And for this one, it was about cybersecurity and communication. And then so he asked me to participate. And although I've worked in that field for a few years, when I saw the other people, I figured like, well, I have nothing to do there. Like, my credentials are very slim in that field compared to the other ones. And also I could not be in person, and but he still wanted me to be there to maybe talk a bit more about the industry side of an entrepreneurship side of the quantum industry. So first of all, apologies for not being there in person. I'm sort of have to triple myself in different things these days. But thank you for accepting to listening to me online. So what I'll be doing for the next 20 minutes or so, I'm just going to give you a bit of a brief overview, a little bit about, the entrepreneurship and industry lay of the land of what it looks. And then the reason why I tend to do this is I have in mind that some of you here might be new to the quantum industry, but you're part of this association of management of innovation. We need a lot of you in the quantum industry because it's growing fast. And sometimes, unlike what we think of ourselves, when we have a background in quantum physics or engineering, we think that we can do everything, which is not always true. There are some scientists that have some very good flair for business, but I would say in general, it's not quite true. So having people that are more on the businessy type of mindset, we need a lot of you in the industry to help grow this industry really fast. And also today, I'll have a bit of a tinge on the Canadian side of things. But what I'm going to be talking about also kind of apply for, globally. So let me just start. There are still a lot of people who think that quantum technologies are still far in the future, or they're not ready, and they're still in the lab experiments. Most certainly, the topic of discussion today is is the most mature field of quantum technology. And some of you have heard today that post-quantum cryptography might not necessarily be a quantum subject per se, but it's a response to the advancements of quantum technology, and is most certainly as important, if not more important than all the other ones, because the way I see it personally is that if we don't implement quantum safe or quantum resilient cybersecurity, then all of the quantum technologies, and especially quantum computing, will become safeguarded, will become classified or restricted, and it's the rest of the humanity and the rest of our future which is going to suffer for it. Hence the importance to move fast and deploy those solutions fast so that we can fully get the positive side of quantum technology. But come back to the subject at hand. Quantum is out of the lab now, and it's been out of the lab for quite a few years. It's an industry. It's young. It's small. It's exponential. It's growing exponentially fast. And already today, like people like Ernst & Young are predicting that 95% of large enterprise executives are already thinking about what quantum can do for us and for them. So definitely in their mind. And also we realize that most likely that about 75% of the large enterprise that have already started looking into quantum technology, whether it's for computing, cybersecurity, communication, are already spending about 1 million plus. Sometimes just 1 million. Some of them are spending tens and hundreds of millions of dollars. So it's already very active. It's already part of the mine. In some cases, it's already at the board level discussion. So we're not fabulating here. It exists. So let me talk a little bit about where I come from, just to give you a bit of a context of the other things I'm going to say. So like Stoyan mentioned, I'm a managing partner in a fund called Quantacet. We're a fairly small fund, 24 million Canadian dollar. We're based in Quebec, but we invest across Canada and globally as well. And we focus on early stage quantum investment. And why did we decide to create that fund at that stage? It's because this is the toughest stage for a young quantum company. And anyone here in the crowd that has quantum-oriented company will agree with me that the first check, like finding the first people to invest in some crazy idea that might be long-term, that might sometimes seems a little too good to be true. VC people are investing money, right? And most of the time they're not investing their money. So they have to be very careful with their risk analysis. And when they don't understand the underlying technology, or they don't understand the traction or the possibility that those technology becomes real, they don't want to take that risk. So at Quantacet, this is where we thought we could play a role, because myself, as well as my colleague Chloe Archambault, which is another one of the partner, we're both from that field. So I've been in quantum for the past 25 years now. Chloe's been in it for the past 15 years. I've worked in the industry as well. Chloe as well. She worked in a company called Anion System, which are building quantum computers. I work at ISARA, which is now because you heard from Philippe Lafrance this morning. Philippe Lafrance, sorry, this morning. And so what we offer is we offer a very heavy technical due diligence to de-risk other people investment. So we invest ourselves, but really our main added value is that we bring along other investors who wants to invest in quantum, but don't want to take that extra risk because they might not understand the technology. So that's kind of where we come in. We also invest across the board in quantum, so quantum sensing, communication, computing, but we also invest in the whole supply chain. And we also consider PQC as a quantum technology, or it's quantum enough for us to look into this. And then we're actively participating and actively looking to invest in some of those companies. Just give you an idea, I was mentioning that the quantum industry is an industry. So here's some of the projections. And as you will see, the numbers varied widely from the sources. But everybody agrees that it's already an industry, and it's growing, and it's going to grow fast. Quantum computing taking the majority of the pot because it's sort of the main value generation enabler. But communication and cybersecurity, well, I'm not going to argue what everyone argued for the past 4 hours. I think you got the picture already. So large sizable market. So for us as investors, it makes sense to go in early because this is where most of the value is created. Yes, it's a bit nebulous. We're still sort of looking into building markets, but this is where the real true value is created. And if we can help sort of accelerate some of those deployment, we're happy to do so. And also, although Quantacet is the only quantum-focused VC fund in Canada, we're also in fairly good company. There's about 6 or 7 funds like us around the world, all of them working and investing globally. And there's more and more larger, more general funds that are coming into the game. So to this day, I think so far, last time we checked, there was over 800 venture capital funds that has invested in a quantum venture. And it keeps on being bigger and bigger and bigger. So it's attracting a lot of private capital, as you can see from an exponential growth in the early years. The last couple of years, we saw a bit of a dip But if you look at any fields, that dip that we saw in quantum investment is the exact same one that the dip we saw in any other technology-oriented field. So it's happening. So now I'm going to switch gear a little bit on how in Canada, Rajat early on kind of mentioned the strategy behind the Canadian government to create that ecosystem and create that industry. And I would like to focus a bit more on what we're doing to support the creation, the acceleration, and the growth of companies across the board in quantum. Okay, what I'm talking here is kind of sector agnostic. And I'll give you a concrete example where Quantacet play a central role is what we've created here in the province of Quebec. And let me be very clear about this. Although it's happening in Quebec, we take projects from across Canada. Okay, so we're not region bound. So we created two structure to really help the creation and the growth of company. The first one being Cuvée Studio. Cuvée being a venture studio, kind of the classic type where venture studios are built to create companies. So what we do with that structure is that we go in universities, we go in labs, and we're trying to find good intellectual property, good technology, good tech, as well as good entrepreneurs. So we always match a technical-minded person with a business-minded person, and we create a company, and we work on them for 3 years. And us, Quantacet, we invest in that company from day one, little by little, so that to make sure that when they go through the 3-year program, they're ready to raise a 5 million plus rounds at seed level. So this is really a way to generate a pipeline of new quantum startups. And we try to focus a lot on not only trying to bring technology to market, but also to bring the market to the technology. So it's not just about techno push, which is a lot of quantum technology is like, but we're trying to find market problems and trying to find a quantum solution or a non-quantum solution to that problem. And then all of the companies that graduate through is because we deem, by we, I mean us, Quantacet, Cuvée Studio, as well as our investment partner, which is Quantum Nation, another quantum-focused fund, is we deem that this is a solid company that can offer something of value to the market. So it's not a sort of a volume, just meat processing type of programs that you get in, you get out, and we try to get as much as possible. We try to work with low volume, but super high quality. Then for companies that are a bit further along their route and are looking to get to the next level or to grow, we've created Asset Quantum. So Asset is one of the leading leading tech incubator here in Quebec. It's based in Sherbrooke. But we created a specific stream for quantum companies because they sort of have different needs, different timelines, different development cycle. So we created a team that is very well aware of the reality of quantum companies. And again, let me stress, companies at Asset and coming out of studios come from all across Canada. And Quantacet is involved in all of those. Although I need also to stress that there's no exclusivity between all of those things. So it's not because we invested in a company that they need to go to the incubator, or it's not because there's a company in the incubator we need to go to. So we still keep that flexibility, but we created this sort of a continuum of entrepreneurship to go from nothing to even supporting companies that are raising their rounds of 10, 50, 100 million by now. But this is not exclusive to Quebec. Canada, I think, in my personal opinion, has done a tremendous job at creating the structure, the funds, the support for early stage company to get started company. So you can see here sort of a bit of a logo zoom, and I'm sure I forgot some of the different type of support that exist, either private or government sponsored. So from Incubators and studios, so I mentioned the two were heavily involved, but there's other ones across Canada that are quantum focused, like the Quantum Valley Ideas Lab in Waterloo, Creative Destruction Lab out of Toronto and Montreal. There's even Kai Venture, which is actually originally from Switzerland, but that opened a presence in Calgary. There's a slew of non-dilutive funding that young enterprise can access to help them sort of cross that valley of death, like the early stage. And also those funds are a lot designed to encourage the collaboration between researchers, young startups, mature startup that might be adopter. And we also created, there's also a handful of what I would call ecosystem hub associations that bring people together. Some of them are more industry focused, some of them are more academic focused or in between. But these are, spread throughout Canada and the main hub. So Vancouver, BC, Alberta, Quebec, Ontario. And we start seeing more and more Canadian private capital being interested in investing in this opportunity. So Quantacet, like mentioned already, we're the only one that are entirely quantum focused. But here I just put a handful that have already invested in quantum ventures, and then there's a list about this long that we're calling every week to make sure that they to try to attract them to the dark side of quantum and invest with us. And so far, we've been pretty successful at bringing some Canadian capital, private capital in the quantum industry. So I will finish maybe by giving a few, not a few recommendations, but I think what we've seen on the ground and what we think we should think as a nation. And here I want to caveat by saying, like, this is not a message to only Canada as a nation, meaning the government, but also as to the private sector as well. So the first one, and that one we hear it all the time, we've said it many, many times, and we're going to keep on repeating it, is that we need to take more risk, okay? And by risk, it means financial risk, it means entrepreneurial risk, it means inventing new structure that never been done before. Yes, quantum is a very quantum investment, either public or private. It's a fairly risky endeavor, as well as starting a company. But like one of the greatest Canadian wise men, if you don't, you miss 100% of the shot you don't take. Wayne Gretzky, wise man of Canada. And in quantum, specifically in quantum, but other deep tech field is the same thing. If you don't take bold risk, you will never have the transformative impact. You will only have the incremental impact, and that's not how you create a leading nation. So Canada has been known as a nation, but also as venture capital and investor, to be quite conservative, quite risk averse. And then now that I've been in the VC world for 4 years, I can definitely attest that it's true. So we need to have a bit of a culture shift if we want to stay, to be ahead and stay ahead of the pack. And also another thing that goes along those lines is we need to celebrate failure. We need to celebrate the entrepreneurs who took a shot and maybe didn't succeed. And it was not necessarily because the business was bad. Sometimes it's a bad timing. Sometimes it's the technology didn't pan out. But in Canada, we have tendency to ostracize the people who try and fail. We need actually to celebrate that, because I can guarantee you that the entrepreneur learned a whole lot through that experience. We need to engage industry early, and then and that's been mentioned already. And then the importance for it is because we need to make sure that the technology that we build, the company we build, are answering problems, real market problems. If you just push technology out of the lab, you're just having a great development project. You don't have a company, because a company is two basic things. You need to have a tech, and you need to have a problem that you're solving. If you don't solve anything, nobody's going to buy it. You don't have a company. So we need to engage the industry early, even if it's just to provide use cases of what's really need to be solved in the market today. Also, something that we work very hard in Canada is to attract international companies, and then we're quite successful. But I would like to remind everyone that attracting companies from outside to open a subsidiary in Canada, it's always great, but they're not the one that's going to drive the expansion of an industry. We need to do it from within. We need to support, we need to invest, we need to accelerate the creation of Canadian company, and we need to make sure that we keep them here. That's always been a very large, I'm not saying anything that hasn't been done before, but the keeping them here, it's a very big challenge that we have in Canada, and we're going to have it in quantum. And it relates back to the first point: to keep them here, we need to take more risk and be willing to invest heavily in resource, time, people, talent. And also something which is unapologetically un-Canadian, we need to start picking winners. We need to be able to say no to people so that we can double down on others, because we cannot make everyone happy little by little. We need to piss some people off so that some other one can shine and have the resource they need. Unpopular opinion, but, and again, let me stress, I'm not only talking to the government. I'm talking to government, to the private people, to the entrepreneurs. It needs to be part of the game. So I'll stop here. I'll just flash a little bit real quick, a conference called Quantum Now. I don't know if somebody talked about it this week, but if you're interested to learn more about the Canadian, specifically the Canadian industry, Quantum Now is the first edition of, it's a showcase of the Canadian industry, but the goal is to showcase the quantum industry to the non-quantum people, to the decision maker, the policy maker, the investors, the people who might benefit from quantum, the people who might want to join quantum. So it's in Montreal, it's in June. I invite you to look it up and see if it's for you. And I will finish with this one nice quote. It's right now in Canada, whether it's in cybersecurity, computing, sensing, communication, we are ahead of the curve, and we have everything in place to be a leader. So the only thing that will prevent us from doing it is us. So let's make sure we capitalize on our strength that we've put in early, and then keep moving forward and be ambitious. So thank you very much.
I was just saying that Quantacet is the one and the only. You know, so it's good to hear. Okay.
But hopefully, you know, this is not a title that we enjoy, actually. We would love to have more funds. Don't get us wrong.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so our next speaker is David Hudson. David Hudson is a adjunct professor in the Technology Innovation Management Program, our programs. And I should say that, you know, if I have made one small contribution to our program is to have contributed to inspire David to get more involved in teaching. He is one of the core professors associated with the digital transformation and entrepreneurship pathway, but also with many other technology-related projects. He is an ICT advisor at Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada. He has been involved as technology executive with for more than 30 years. He has a PhD in management from Carleton and interested in specializing in how emerging technologies take flesh. So this is part of what you'll be talking today.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate everybody coming out today. I don't know about you, but I've gotten a lot from this conversation already, things that I'm going to take away and use. My Bulgarian brother and my Peruvian brother were both whispering in my ear, make sure you bring it back to adoption. So the framing question, I don't know if you caught this when you agreed to come, what are the factors that can accelerate the adoption of quantum safe solutions to enable our digital future? My goal here is to bring us back to adoption. And in particular, I want you thinking about questions for the panel. We're going to bring all the speakers up. Is that the plan? Yep, we'll bring all the speakers up at the end. So think about questions related to adoption. I will also be selfish. I'm representing a university. And if I did what Bruno did, I would have a chart that showed we can sell you students as a blade, as a rack, or an entire data center, right? We're happy to do that. Joking aside, we have students working on the study in the TIM program. Other faculties have students working as well. We are always interested in how to get stronger real world connections. And some of the work that I'm going to present is actually work that was done by our students here. So just selfishly, if adoption is related to competence, I want to hear about that too, because we're in the competence business. Okay. I should also say that this work, Professor Tanev is also directly involved in as well. My name's on the chart, but his work's in here too. So value propositions for post-quantum cryptography. The basic idea here is simple. You know, the movie where there's this big technology wave coming and there's some early technology wavelets that hit before the big wave hit. We've seen the movie before from a management science perspective. We talk about disruptive technologies, and disruptive technologies, there's a whole body of literature, some of which goes back to the Industrial Revolution, that talks about how these things happen. Also, you know, we're talking about how and why companies choose to stroke you a check to buy the products. Value propositions. Why do customers choose to buy? Huge body of literature on that. In particular, a really great body of literature that focuses on technology type solutions. And that's kind of in our wheelhouse here in the TIM program. Use of technology, why technologies are adopted, why they matter. So that's the focus of this, okay? So I'm basically going to outline a little research activity that we've got going now. We're in the middle of it, so I'm not going to give you conclusions. I ask you to think about basically the process we're following and how we can improve it. I've already got at least one great data point on how we can improve what we're doing, but we're not yet at the conclusions. This kicked off, so I've been in the university environment long enough to know that our heart beats kind of once a term. So this started less than a heartbeat ago. We had a conversation with the Nokia team just a couple of months ago about some of what Martin shared here. And one of the things that twigged us was this question of adoption and why aren't more adopting sooner? And so that's where this came from. It kicked off a couple of months ago. And this is really what we're trying to do. We're trying to understand how PQC fits relative to quantum. That's been discussed at length here. I'm not going to unpack that for you any better than the previous speakers have done. I've got one chart on PQC adoption, also already covered. There's a couple of points I'll make from that when we get to it. But mostly, what can we learn from the literature that's out there? So there's a bunch of academic literature which talks about PQC. So in theory, our assertion is we can learn a lot about what the PQC offers are from, I'm going to say, relatively neutral academic literature. Okay, academic literature has a few virtues. If it's from a good source, it's peer-reviewed, it's well-structured, and we can peek into that and understand something about the offers before we get to vendors. We also have invested some energy looking at the vendors that are out there and how they are positioning in the marketplace. Okay, so we take those as two, if you like, data sets, and from there we want to apply some management theory to it. And there may be some other pieces that go in, but we're definitely looking at this from a lens or with the management literature that talks about disruptive technology and value propositions, okay? And then from there, how can we take some hypotheses about alternate value propositions and test those, okay? We're not at that stage yet. We're kind of in the middle of this. Okay, so these are our research questions. What technology management theories can we apply? Assumption is quantum is going to be big and disruptive. PQC is an early wave of that. So that's point number one. Using these theories, can we create alternate value propositions for PQC relative to the ones that are being used today? And then how can we validate those in some sense? So it's that's the exercise that we're going through here. I'll only make one little point from this. You folks know this. I normally use this chart for the non-quantum literate groups. The only point that I'll make is, as has been emphasized, so PQC is related to quantum technologies. That's important for us to understand. The other thing that's important is that it's sophisticated in that it affects the full stack. There's lots of things going on between us and the services that we use and back again that are touched by this. So it's not a point offer. That's relevant to the conversation around value proposition and disruption. And there's significant economic considerations. It's not free. And because of hardware and software and performance and all those things, the economics matter too. And that's relevant in terms of a discussion of both the disruption, but also value proposition. Okay, so value proposition. As a management scientist, from an academic perspective, the value proposition is not a guess as to why people will buy something. Moreover, it is not the offer. A value proposition is the argument for why a customer chooses to transact with you as opposed to with your competitor, or as opposed to doing nothing, sitting on their hands. That's the argument. And if you peek into the literature, you'll find, explanations that talk about value propositions as enablers of transactions, as attractors, magnets for investment, the importance of differentiation, alignment with strategy, customer set. Anyway, there's a bunch of different frameworks we can choose to apply. But the key point is there's a systematic approach that we can take, given an offer and a market, to say, this is the type of gain that we believe the offer can deliver, or pain relief that it can deliver to the customer, and how that occurs, and what language gets attached to that to argue for the value proposition. It's not, it's systematic. There are tools we can use to do that. This has already been covered at great length. This is my chart to assert to an audience that's less literate in this space that it's expected to be big, and it's currently significant, but relatively small. Therefore, we're early in the hockey stick. Okay, so that's describes some features, some characteristics of a market that sounds disruptive. Sounds like this disruption's going on. Okay, so this gets into some of the work that we're doing. So here we're looking at the academic literature. Okay, so think peer-reviewed literature, lots of different sources globally. And we're looking into that literature because we believe it's got some validity to it. There's some stringent, review mechanisms that are applied before the stuff is published. It's available online. It's well structured. One of the virtues of academic literature is that there are forms that are followed, including the method that was applied to create the paper. So in other words, a good academic paper not only has useful information, it also describes where it came from and how it was created so that you, in theory, can reproduce it. A good paper has those qualities. So we use a bunch of tools, large language model driven, basically to find the literature that we think is relevant, and then to boil it down to the best unique articles. And if you're interested in the precise steps that we follow to do that, happy to share that with you. We have that all. And this is, from our point of view, think of it as a mapping of literature. It's a scoping literature review, and that participant concept context phrase at the top describes the approach that we've taken to it. And again, that's a legitimate academic way to look at a body of literature, not to find a conclusion, but answer the question, what's the entire scope of what the literature seems to say? How can I map this body of literature? Step one. Step two, then we apply large language models. We use large language models in, think of it in a conversational mode, to basically go through those articles and ultimately answer the question, how does this literature seem to map out? What are the main themes, topics, groupings for the literature? Okay. All of this focused on the PQC academic literature, and the types of questions that we're asking, they're summarized here. Again, if you want details, happy to share them. What types of companies seem to be out there? What types of offers are there? Are there unique benefits asserted clearly? And what are the challenges? What are the things that are precluding adoption? Okay. And so from that, at a high level, there's details available. We see three groups of academic literature. So if you ask the question of an academic, what's going on with PQC? Basically, the top level answer is there's a bunch of algorithms out there. I'm sure you're all familiar with these that are in the horse race. There's also a bunch of literature that basically talks about how you would deploy this. Hybrid versus standalone being kind of the simplest distinction. And then finally, there's a bunch of kind of market vertical sort of academic papers that are written. Transaction processing for the finance industry, that kind of thing. You find those in the third bucket. And we've got a tree here that you can look at, so you can double click on each of these. But at a high level, the academic literature would say, it looks like there's basically three, if you like, types of offers that are out there. a technology-centric offer, a deployment model kind of offer, and something that's more vertically aligned, maybe more solution. Okay, if I can use that phrase or word. Okay. So that's peeking at the academic literature. So next, we kind of did the exercise, slightly different techniques, slightly different tools, looking at basically publicly available information on commercial offers that are out there in the market. Okay, so same high-level approach, search, synthesis, and then trying to draw some insights out of it. Slightly different tools because we are looking out, across the web basically to see what's out there. So this is only publicly available information. Obviously, there's a bunch of stuff that I'm sure you share with your customers that's not out there. We're focusing just on what's out there. There is an extensive exercise in deduplication and manual validation just because of how information appears about companies and offers on the web. The manual validation in particular is there's lots of companies out there that are still in stealth mode. So we can find a company, but we don't know what they do. There's lots of companies out there that I shouldn't say lots, some companies out there which we can guess at what they do, but they really don't provide much information other than a contact us page. So those are pulled out manually. At the end of the day, our search found 63 companies in the PQC space. From there, we use topic modeling, so systematic approach to look at a body of literature for keywords and phrases, eliminate the ones that are distracting. There's a lot of effort put in to train the model around the difference between how something is branded versus what it is, because obviously that comes into play with this exercise, but then ultimately to categorize, to group. We chose to group down to 5 and to identify companies that seem to represent a particular group. And so those are ones with a strong correlation. The thing about a topic model, and sorry, orange is just the particular tool that we use. The thing about a topic model is it's a statistical model that says, if I look at these documents that describe these things, these ones seem to be related. And because it's statistical, you can pop out the ones that are most relevant. Okay. And then from there, insight developments, looking basically for what are the, on paper, on the web, value propositions that are out there, who do they seem to be addressing? Are there differentiators that can be identified, cost value trade-offs? This also does give us some insight into some broader trends in the market, at least as represented in what companies publish. Okay. And here, again, lots more detail available if you're interested, happy to share. Basically 5 categories. Secure digital infrastructure. So think of it as ICT products for the most part in topic 1. Topic 3, resilient communication and encryption. Think of those primarily as communication products that are PPC enabled. Technologies that will get embedded in something else. Could be software, could be hardware, could be both. But embedded offers what I think of as OEM&P. So basically monitoring products, things that allow you to observe what's happening and understand what's going on in your environment. And then robust authentication and protection. This group is, trying to figure out how best to distinguish that one. This one is a little bit more solution-y in flavor. Tends to be more about solutions. So products, embedded, OEM&P, and then solutions are kind of the categories we came up with. And these are statistical relationships. So some companies will appear in more than one category. And that's an example of some of the keywords that pop up underneath each. All right, so what are we going to do with that? So again, I want to bring this back to what management theory says we can do. And these are just some examples, or maybe other things that we want to apply, but the value proposition design. So if you've ever done an MBA or even an executive MBA or seminar, you probably bumped into some kind of business model canvas. There are tools that can be used, given an offering, given an understanding of the market, to argue for these are who we're going to target, and these are the types of pain points we can resolve or gains we can offer. And in particular, where you're talking about a sophisticated, complex offer in a market where you have institutional buyers, which means multiple decision makers, what are the offers you make for each particular decision maker in that chain? value proposition design. Disruptive innovation theory, that's exemplified by this diagram. Disruptive innovation theory would say that your early adopters buy for different reasons than the early majority. Okay, so technically literate, risk forward type players, they understand the problem even before you open your mouth. They get it. You don't have to sell them on what's going on. Early majority, different characteristics, probably waiting for standards, maybe waiting for other things. And then of course you have the late majority. They're the ones that, they're only going to do it once they see that they have no choice but to do it. Okay, so disruptive innovation theory. Other theories though, digital transformation. So if you take the digital transformation literature, it would say that, well, hang on, if you're talking about an emerging technology that is not yet well understood, customers in general, maybe not the early adopters, but certainly your majority, they need to discover value. And how do they do that? They do that in a few ways. First, they get their hands on, they experiment, they play, and then probably they find value internally first, and then with their customers second. That's what digital transformation theory would say. And it would say, and here's how you go about doing those types of things. And then last but not least, there's user-driven innovation theories that can be applied as well. This would say, oh, this stuff is all very interesting, but until you can bring it back to a user and what their needs are and what's going to motivate them to do something, you haven't really got an offer that's hunting yet. Okay. Point here is that we're going to take the work that we've done to this point and now begin to apply these lenses and say, all right, what is the value proposition? What can be offered? All right. So I would suggest, and I wasn't taking detailed notes, but I heard a lot of what the students have reflected in the presentation so far, that there are, solutions to the quantum threat that are technically centric. There are some that are much more, argued from the point of view, how do we get from where we are today to a future? Do we go greenfield? Do we go something more transitional, more hybrid? And then application specific, which maybe we heard the least about today, but what's going on in healthcare versus finance, critical infrastructure, and so on. But are there other value propositions? And so if we just consider disruptive technology thinking, for example, it would argue that technology adoption varies with time and who you're talking to. That early adopters do not care so much about the fact that they're going to actually lose some things. There's going to be some trade-offs with the early versions of a technology versus later. The early adopters see a different value point than the late majority. Okay, so there's this notion in disruptive innovation that when you have a new technology, initially it'll underperform relative to what used to be there. Over time, that'll get addressed. But the early adopters, they don't care about that. They're valuing something else. But the late majority is looking to basically have their cake and eat it too. They're waiting for the performance to come up, for example. Okay. So performance trade-offs, whether there's standards. I mean, clearly in this space, I think there is definitely a factor around to what extent do I have to put risk money on an early implementation that I may have to replace in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years as PQC finally, or sorry, quantum computing finally emerges, standards are fully resolved and so on. So there may be some waiting on that. Changes to status quo infrastructure operations. So do we roll this out into the, let's call it the classic cybersecurity environment, or do we imagine a new environment? And we've already had a couple of people mention this idea of building, agile cybersecurity environments, and this being, if you like, the trigger for moving from what we have been doing to this more agile environment. Okay. And so, just as an example, these are not yet well thought through, but value propositions that we could imagine, or maybe the catalog of value propositions we could imagine. So competitive advantage, first mover. There are technology buyers, at least we've seen them in the past, that are willing to adopt something that maybe the rest of the market isn't ready for simply because they like the badge. We are quantum, or we are PQC today. PQC adopters offer premium services using their PQC infrastructure. I've certainly seen a little bit out there in the buyer market that there's beginnings of some assertions that we are a better player because we've embedded PQC solutions in our offer, but there could be more of that. PQC offers premium services based on customers offer premium services based on their use of PQC. Efficiency. Is there an argument for future proofing in doing this? Is there a transition here that gets us out of, let's say, the last 20 years of cybersecurity whack-a-mole into a new posture that is ultimately much more cost-effective? Crypto agility, I guess, is the buzzword associated with that. Is there a partnership play? Are there communities that could be built where this is not simply standards compliant, maybe not even simply a regulatory response, but a community that says we're going to do this regardless? I just heard an argument that maybe Canada should do something like that. Partnering with quantum safe firms leads to other quantum technology opportunities. If PQC is an early wave, does this get you in a position so you can take advantage of other quantum developments once they happen? Innovation. Is there IP to be had here? Even in the user community, I guess is my point there. And if we're headed into a space where quantum is the norm, maybe this is entirely about, I need people with skill sets. This is the first place that I can solve a real problem with practical solutions that allow me to develop those quantum skills. So this is at this level, a brainstorm list, but the sort of thing that we intend to blow out with some detail, some arguments behind it, and then pursue some form of validation with it, probably with folks like yourself. Okay, so that's where we're up to. We think of PQC as this kind of early wave of a bigger wave. The big wave is disruptive. We're going to just accept that for the purpose of this argument. What technology management theories can we apply? I've given you an idea of some of the ones we intend to apply, and we'll apply them with discipline. In other words, we'll show you all the steps in between data and conclusion. And then we'll go through a process of validating those. Do some of these hunt better than others, and why? I suspect, and I'm strongly suspect, I know that the answer here is not a one-size-fits-all value proposition. It's almost certainly a continuum, depending on decision maker, depending probably on sector. I heard geography, where you are on the planet, matters. I'm embarrassed I hadn't thought of that before, but that's almost certainly going to be a factor in this as well. Okay, so I'm happy to answer your questions on that when we get to the panel. I'll come back to the sales pitch though, and this will lead me into our dean. We're doing this with highly motivated, really talented students that it blows me away what they can accomplish. And sorry, not a word of lie. We can cut some people loose who don't know that much about quantum on an industry sector using state-of-the-art tools, and they produce really sophisticated results in a relatively short span of time. I'm impressed over and over again with what can be accomplished there. So if I can leave you with one sort of narrow sales pitch for the kind of competences that we bring to the table, it's that motivated people that can bring the best of the academic literature, state-of-the-art tools, and tackle a real-world problem. So happy to talk to you more about that. And with that, I'm going to invite our dean to come up and say a few words.
Thank you, David.
Thank you for coming. This is Key Emilio, sorry, who has been a kind of a supporter of the quantum technology entrepreneurship movement stream in our program, and the engagement of Sprott with other departments that are pushing forward new programs and new research.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Stoyan, and David, thank you. I probably couldn't have said it any better than you ended off with. So you took my comments. I just wanted to say really quickly, and I know that I'm standing between you and the panel, and then I'm assuming a lunch of sorts, so I'll be really quick. I guess anecdotally, just to dovetail off of what Stoyan had just mentioned, I'm looking at Michel Barbeau here, who's in computer science, right? And I start to think about the role that business plays in this space. If you look at what's going on, you would expect that you would have computer scientists, you would expect that you have software engineers, you would expect that you have folks like that who are involved in this space. Where does business fit in? We all as business leaders understand the need when we're talking about a disruptive change, as you mentioned, and how critical it is for us to understand how we can help these quant businesses who are involved in quantum technology to actually take it to the next level and implement it.
That's what we offer. That's what we offer through our TIM program. That's what our students are all eating up and willing to go out and help support our local community with. So I wanted to leave you all with that, just echoing off of what you had said, and welcome you all and wish you all, I guess, the rest of the half hour or so that's left in this presentation, and enjoyment, and thank you for joining us.
Well, I just wanted to make 2 points here. David had 2 references. This one below, those names into 2025, and another, there was another one somewhere forward. Yeah, and those are actually 2 groups. What is it? Yeah, here. Yep. Those are 2 groups in my course, which is using machine learning tools to develop entrepreneurial insights. And it's one of the assignments. You know, Tony used one of his students to create an initial set of articles. We used it as a basis and then looked at everything that people have said related to the adoption and to the factors contributing to the adoption of quantum safe technologies. And then, you know, they worked and they developed the assignment. Some of them got an A+. Then David took it over and he has put this together. It's really, honestly, I didn't believe that students will get that far when we started the course, because I'm not directly in the domain. They're not directly, but that's the purpose of doing it, you know, learning. So it was an absolutely kind of a efficient exercise.
The other lesson there is be careful what you say. If you say, "Oh, that's an interesting problem," Stoyan's going to take that and give it to his students. Like, not next term, but like next week.
Okay, so thank you. We're at the end, and now we will go to our panel discussion. So I would like our students to help me put. We have the chairs already. Oh, that was quick. All speakers, please join us here. Let me see if we have some more of those fancy chairs. Or yeah, the closer to the microphone, the better. David Hudson will be facilitating the conversation.
Are we supposed to line up and?
Grab a chair. I don't know if we thought it through that one. Okay. Yeah. So hopefully you've been thinking about questions. Oh, and do we have somebody watching online for questions? Nothing online yet. Okay. So I'll just kick it off with one. So most of the presentations we heard so far were very kind of forward assertions of the offers, problems need to be solved. Anybody want to tackle the question? What's the biggest barrier you see right now to adoption, basically, of quantum safe technologies? Biggest barrier. All right, start with.
Bruno's going to go for 6 minutes if he goes first, so let me start.
So is this our only mic?
Yeah, but it actually works.
It's real good?
Yeah.
It's real good.
Yeah, no, I have one at home, by the way. I'll double check them. Check, 1, 2, check, 1, 2. Okay.
Oh, sweet.
In my experience, the biggest barrier is how do you prioritize the adoption of PQC in light of everything else that they have to deal with?
So executive level.
So I'm thinking from a CISO perspective. There's ransomware, AI. You can't go 5 minutes without hearing about something new about AI related to security. You have so many priorities you have to deal with, and you bring in quantum, and you're like, well, here's an estimate for when it will come eventually. You know, there's not a lot of external forces that are forcing you to move towards it right now, and it can feel really overwhelming, right? The A to Z of start here and then do everything you need to do to transition and end, that's a lot.
Okay.
And I think people get overwhelmed and they just sort of shut it out and say that's going to be the next person.
So just maybe to paraphrase, so there's Martin said there was executive level awareness of this, but then there's a noise floor you have to get through in terms of actually doing something.
Executives are more aware than you might think. I mean, it's not uniformly distributed across every industry, but like I think even ISACA had some good research about this recently.
Yeah.
they're aware of the quantum threat. It's just they don't know how to prioritize it or act on it, especially in light of everything else.
Bruno?
I would also agree. I agree with Philip. The other thing that we find is cryptography has been laid down as a foundational element of our current digital world.
Yeah.
So it's as if you came to this university campus and suggested to the folks that designed all the buildings, and we have to replace all foundations tomorrow, or we have to go through this massive project. You're not going to take that lightly. It's going to be a very high risk. If you make the wrong choice on foundation changes, your building will collapse. So this is so critical to all industry that they're very, very careful to make a decision. It's not one of those things where you can just say, we'll test it out. And if it doesn't work, that's fine. We still operate. Our machines, our businesses continue to operate. This is not one of those types of project. It's a very important, it's fundamental to the very existence of all of these companies, like be it banks, government, and so on. So cryptography, switching your cryptography and your providers of cryptography is not one of those events you go through lightly.
Right.
So I think that that's a bigger impact.
So significant technology change, but also significant vendor change potentially as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just to complement, I agree with you too. What I see is like language is a big barrier. Just pure language. I see PQC, right? In your chart, David, PQC, it's an algorithm, right? I talk about an outcome, quantum safe networks.
Okay.
We're using different words, sometimes to mean different things. As Bruno just said, we're trying to underpin a transformational change for cryptography that is used everywhere in our digital economy for identifying value, creating value, and selling value. And in order to actuate that change, you need decision makers that are not so much a CISO. They're decision makers making decisions on creating value, selling values about what? PQC. You're spending more time explaining properly the nuances and the real issue, but we don't have the right language yet.
Okay.
So we should not lead with the what. We're not leading enough with the why. That's why I talk about risk assessment. We've heard it today. We've heard it. It's the root of our digital economy that is being tested. But we're not talking like that. We're talking usually when I see PQC, you're like, yeah, you're leading with an algorithm.
Okay. Anybody else? Yes.
I would argue time is something that's very important to consider too. When we talk about RSA, it's been around for decades. There's a lot of ingrown, inbuilt trust. In the development of the PQC algorithms throughout the process, I think at one point they were and this was fairly certain that they had a larger subset, a larger number of algorithms. They were broken very, very quickly. So when you have a very transformational change in your cryptography, and understanding the risk-averse nature of a lot of companies, people are having a wait-and-see approach. They don't necessarily have the technical expertise, and they want to see that these stand at least some sort of test of time, maybe beyond initial. That's why you have perhaps fewer early adopters.
Okay. Sorry, I'm taking notes to guide my students. Please.
Yeah, I would agree. It's with Martin, especially on language.
Yeah.
Because it's not, let's search everything around PQC. There's 3 different quantum safe technologies that are fundamentally different. Like we have a physics-based solution.
Yeah.
We have, and we have PQC and old solutions that are still quantum safe.
Mm-hmm.
So I think CISOs are going to be looking for, okay, I just need to get to a quantum safe place.
Right.
And in general, they hope that their vendors will do it. Like I've talked to many financial institutions that say, well, my vendors will take care of that. Cisco, Nokia, they'll take care of this problem.
So they're relying on their sort of classic
Yes.
ICT vendors, which, okay.
The
So
only
that's
question
interesting.
is, do I have to upgrade? Is it a forklift upgrade or is it just a software upgrade?
Right. Okay,
I cannot resist make your point, listening at language comment. So one way to look at innovation, we would see it from the lens of adoption and as a conversational skill. People adopt when you are able to articulate what's, so I love this definition. It goes away from products and features and everything, but it is a conversational skill because as a technology company or, you know what you have done, but people don't. And the only way to articulate, to communicate properly.
It's a human that makes the decision.
Yeah.
And it may not be the human that has been entrusted with cryptography for the last 30 years that will make this decision.
Sorry, if I could add to what Martin just said, that is also something really peculiar about these widgets, I'll call them. They actually are at a intersection point. If you go to a company or into an enterprise, you find yourself talking to typically three different personas. You have those that have to deal with the machines and deploy them and stack them. So that's one conversation, one language. You have those that are talking to you with the PQC algorithm. Is it MLDSA? Are you looking with psych and all of these things? And then because of their interfacing to the world of cloud and the application designers and developers, all these guys want to know is what API are you REST-based and so on. So you have these trifecta of challenges, and you need to come up with a language plan when you're depicting what you do. These people here will need to hear about that. These people will need to hear about something else. And sometimes a lot of folks, they want to know, if you do an operation on your machine, can I have an audit trail of all the operations? So the auditors are a different, yet again, a fourth member, if you wish, of the community trying to zoom in on how do we migrate these pieces of tech that we've built from so long ago. So I think language, and it's not a simple one cheat sheet. It's a multiplicity.
Okay.
At least we see.
I'll make another comment. I mean, I think we should also not simplify the adoption. It's a huge ecosystem. And I think many of those barriers are natural barriers too. I mean, things could be done maybe much better with the language, but it's a huge problem. I mean, we've seen and it's an orthogonal transitioning too, right? I mean, there's the problems are changing, algorithms are changing, hardware may have to change. But we've seen even transitioning from very well-known hashing algorithms to new ones, even took like years and years. So I think in this case, I want to say like we are doing okay, I think, but we should be doing much better. And I think it is also a combination of things. Like some of the algorithms were not widely known, even though one of the algorithms, which is quantum secure, that we know as early as RSA was known, but then standardization just happened maybe over a year ago, and now vendors have more motivation to put things in market, and the mandates are coming. So I think this process is a bit, I think, long, but that's been the case, and because it's spreading all over the internet. And a lot of things like Linux, Chrome, we mentioned like those things getting adapted on the background, but I think large scale institution-wise, it's really hard.
Okay. So I've got a few related questions here online, which aren't surprising given that a lot of our audience would be students and academic program owners. So change gears. As you look at executing the mission of your organizations, what skills do you find hardest to obtain? Where do we need a skills upgrade? I'll say in a Canadian context, but some of your global players.
We've been working on building a company that we're building, and we knew a long time ago that it's funny that the field that we live in, the field of cryptography and key management, had its golden age in the mid-90s.
Yeah.
There was a massive rush. Anyone in IT would want to deal with the cryptography and key management. It was the place to be. If you come into most companies today and you talk to them about you're going to be responsible for the crypto, they think of it as you've been demoted. And it's been so long, almost nothing new has changed in the past 30 years, that the vast majority of brainiac people have moved on to wanting to tackle AI stuff or cloud computing stuff. So to re-inject the smarts of the world back into this field at a moment where we need huge amounts to deal with all that transition is a challenge. So one of the things we have been working hard at was to actually bring in through co-op programs, Carleton, Ottawa U, and many of universities, is to actually bring in fresh brain power into our world and hopefully instill and hopefully get some injection of that talent into this field. And it's a long process to rebuild that capacity. But I think this is a doable thing because we are seeing engineers that now are working for us and technologists and scientists working as full-time employees that have come through this process. And we're a strong believer in the community. And I think this is part of us trying to transition as a country. Everyone needs to do its part. And I think there's a big amount or huge amount of talent. And if you find the talent and you can entice it to get into this field, there's a career to be made. There will be many tens of years of work ahead of us. None of us are going to be, I'll definitely retire before it's all finished. I hope I will. Anyways, I'd say that's an important part.
Others?
I'll make a comment. I mean, finding talent is hard, but retainment is also very hard. I think that's the second phase. But also from just the PQC or new algorithms point of view, like RSA or other algorithms have been long enough. And even like in middle school curriculum, you can see parts that, you can teach RSA to younger people and then they get motivated. But now taking those algorithms on a maybe younger age to teach them, to motivate them, I think there's a lot to do on the education side too. At PhD level, sure, you get some talent, but I think we should probably pay attention to maybe lowering it down and teach them.
Okay, so push it
towards solutions
earlier in the curriculums and okay.
Yeah, so just to build on Bruno's comments earlier, we need to get these more people back interested into this topic. But I mean, even looking at the NIPSIA program, for example, here at Carleton, you've got elements of computer science being taught to these people doing international affairs, right? Just like any other number of things, like you see, I'm happy to see Sprott here is supporting this, but whether it's business, whether it's PR or whatever, like how do we get the basics of cryptography or whatever into those programs so that you can speak about it more plainly at a I don't know, like at a common level so that people understand it, right? Because in order to get the adoption, in order to get people working on these kinds of things, it has to be a topic that's consumable across the board in every sort of facet of whether it's business or whatever it is that you're doing. So I think we need to find a way, and this ties back to the lexicon or the language piece that we were speaking about earlier. How do we make this stuff consumable by, I don't want, an average person, somebody with a bachelor's coming out of a bachelor's degree program, how do you make that palatable to that? Cryptography is hard. Obviously, you need experts in understanding the physics behind it, or the physics behind the quantum piece, or the math behind the algorithms. But more important, well, maybe not more importantly, but equally importantly, we need to be able to have a number of disciplines be able to speak about this stuff confidently and competently, so that it just normalizes it.
Anyone else? Of course, but you need a microphone.
I you made a very good point. I think that the best way to do that is to have meetings with the faculty in industry, where the faculty in the industry get to know what the language is, what is it that industry actually wants and needs right now, because that will vary over time. And we can facilitate that. And I think that my colleagues in computer science and physics, and they will all come for that. They, I think, need it. In their opinion as well, academics are, but I think to address your point, this is something that concretely we can do. And invite all these guys to come in and say, look, I need co-op students. I can't find them. This is what I'm looking for. I need projects, I need people, this is the talent. I don't need where you're at right now, but I need it in 2 years. That conversation doesn't happen as much in this area of quantum as it does in other areas. When we talk about agriculture, we talk about mechanical engineering or knowledge, what's happening with that, the conversation is natural. With you guys, it's not. So I think we should fix that, which is going to know each other, I'll throw a party for God's sake, have everybody drunk too much.
Right.
And have the academics, kind of let you know what they think about what you're doing, and you let them know what you think you need, and you may not be right.
But you won't be alone.
We'll have an opinion.
So that would be a concrete suggestion for us to follow up with this group.
Okay. Like that makes sense. Question in the back?
Get this exercise. Need to get your steps in.
Morning, everybody. My question is actually still in the discussion we're having now about adoption and bridging the gap between research and industry. And it's not the question. It's not specific to cryptography, or more quantum in general. I'm a grad student here, just finished, and I recently did the research as well, in line with that was presented by Professor Hudson. But this was really about quantum sensing applied to the oil and gas industry, and it's still in the same fashion, reviewing scholarly articles, industry reports, great data, basically, and trying to find out what's in the data. And one of the things that, expectedly, that came out was, the mismatch or the lag between research and industry articles. And clearly, there isn't, there's a lag. And academic articles are very optimistic about tests and experiments, and then industry data is focused on implementation. And so I want to know what are the current avenues, or at least anything that's been worked on to bridge that gap. And what I mean by research, not just academic research, or not just here, like in our institution here, but bridging the gap between industry companies that actually have these use cases, where use cases are adopted versus those who are, in the lab, not just in the universities, but some of yourselves in companies who are doing active research. How maybe it's advanced in cryptography, but I find that that gap is wider, it seems, on my research in the other fields. So what are the avenues for bridging that gap, maybe symposiums or workshops, conferences?
Okay, bridging the gap between research and practice, and you all have different perspectives on that.
I'll take that. I might even go towards the quantum sensor part of it. So there's a knowledge translation challenge where often industries have a base of expertise related to their own industry, their own vertical, and the quantum expertise necessary is outside of that. So for sensors specifically, oil and gas industries have a lot of expertise, a lot of training with respect to valorizing their entire chain, right? They don't necessarily have expertise. They might have it in drone technology, but not in developing a quantum magnetometer. So generally, there are some programs, albeit small scale, to try to bring together researchers who are cutting edge with industry to try to increase industrial research. In other fields, other than quantum, fields are more mature. Those industries typically have the expertise in-house. For emerging tech, because it changes so rapidly and so quickly, government investment, government programming is one way to try to bridge that gap, but that's a short-term approach. In the long term, you'd imagine as the field matures, those industries that see benefit to it would start training and hiring in-house. I hope that helps a little.
Other perspectives.
So in a large corporation like Nokia, 90,000 people, 130 countries, when we invest in R&D, we have two ways to look at this, right? So the R&D for linear innovation, small transformative type of R&D used to be inside of a business with a return of investment within 18 to 24 months. One, it's hugely transformative type innovation, right? So you could call it emerging or transformative. We had to continue invest separately in Bell Labs, Nokia Bell Labs, where we're doing transformative investments where we're not expecting from a business who reports every 3 months a direct return on investment on advanced research. So we had to actually separate a little bit different types of how we conduct R&D, how we measure the return on that investment to actually fuel from our means our advanced research versus our research that is more linear in line with the business that we're in today. When it gets to quantum communication, the business that I represent at Nokia, we cannot invest right now in quantum technology. What we do is we invest by our Bell Lab research for transformative quantum communication type technologies that may have an impact in 15, 20 years from now. So you have to actually bucketize your investments, rationalize it so that you can continue with your cadence of reporting every 3 months, profitability for your shareholders, yet having some investment seed, strategic investments and having an ability to go forward. And then it's almost like, how do you take the Bell Lab innovation back into business? It's via proof of concept, via pilots, via these early market makers, early adopters, where business now sees that it's the time to execute a pivot, a business-driven pivot, because the serviceable addressable market is big enough at this point in time to start taking what is advanced research into more linear research, smaller degree of transformation. And that's how we continue fueling our innovation.
Could I, if you don't mind, I might venture that in the case of sensors, specifically to mining and oil and gas, these are sectors where the cost of the investment of going and figuring out if there's some oil or minerals worth it are so high stake that if I ever know in the company I have an advantage because of the quantum sensing capability I may not want to publish about that. I may want to keep it very tight, in fact, top secret sauce. So in that sector, you may not see a lot of publicly known industry best practice, because that makes you the best at that. And your value on the stock market is going to go like this. That secret sauce, I suspect you won't find a lot of publicly written things about. Maybe in 10 years, they'll talk about what they do today. But I would suspect you're not going to find a whole lot of things that if they know how to use it, they'll keep it to themselves. That'd be my suggestion, that you may find that gap to continue being a gap.
I just wanted to basically a point that Koray made that so it's not that easy. So because it's not just a model that we need, let's think about architectural and modular innovation. The industry is not at the modular level yet, so everything is related to infrastructure that needs to be there. If we think about optical networking, it didn't happen at once. There were amplifiers, then DWDM, then fiber gratings. So those things came one after the other. So can we see PQC as being the keystone now? And what's next? What's missing if we think from architectural point of view? Is there anything that really people, it's not just the availability of those things, but there is other things that need to be there before adoption. What is that?
Well, I mean, again, you raised the word PQC, right? You're focused on one thing. Whereas, a quantum network, if you look at what's happening in the EU, there's the whole Euro QCI initiative. They're hell-bent on building and funding a quantum network. Nothing to do with PQ.
That's why I'm not responding, right? Because I'm not sure exactly what you mean by PQC, but
I'm just saying that we have a piece, but we lack other
well,
pieces.
I think, where I go back to what I said, I think we have a major missing big gap. It's communication. That's first. In my charts, I'm trying to talk about an outcome that we should be looking for rather than technologies and how to realize something that we don't even name, right? So we should be talking about a quantum safe future. How does a quantum safe future is built? What do we need? I think we need quantum safe applications. I happen to be working for a corporation that helps the world to connect. So I think quantum safe networks as well. Networks that are quantum safe, applications that are quantum safe. Let's get the planet on that. Then let's go into, okay, how do we compose? What are the value chain of enablers on a per sovereign nation? Because that's my life right now, is actually quantum safe, but sovereign quantum safe. Because there's no, what I mean, there's no one solution that fits all. It's not just on the technology side. It's also on the value chain that are actually coming together for building quantum safe application, for building quantum safe networks. And yes, once you start with deprecating this to the technology, you will need PQCs. You'll need more PQCs, and PQC is just an algo. PQC goes into security protocols. So when I hear that, okay, NIST certified it and we're now vendors are ready to productize, well, no, time out. Somebody had a great chart about, well, the algo goes into security protocols. IETF needs to certify. IETF needs to ratify. 3GPP needs to adopt these IETF security protocols. Vendor needs to actually load up and upscale their products to be product improved for PQC. And that's just like, okay, one punctual set of punctual events that will keep repeating. Like Tony said, in Europe, PQC is part of the answer, but so is physics. So is physics. So there is a complement. Well, why is that? Right? So quantum safe future, how do we assure quantum safe future? How do we mitigate risk? Well, it's not adopting a single technology, it's adopting a basket of technology, placing it in a digital fabric. So a lot is needed. That's to make the long story short.
Language, technology or basket, and
value chains, adapted value
geography.
chain.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks to the geopolitics we are living in, right? So there's no one recipe.
Right. I'm gonna try to squeeze one more question in.
Okay, and I think Martin began to speak on it, but I mean, we heard this morning, the US has one view on some of these topics and the rest of the world, particularly the European emphasis, was a different one. How do we, in Canada, how do we navigate that from an academic perspective, from a government perspective, from a particularly, I think, I'm a small company, I'm trying to start in this space, where should I place my bets, etc. Tough question probably, but I think a good one. Over.
Well, since I started, right? So I think it's, to me, I refuse to say it's a different view. It's a complementary view, right? So in Europe, they will adopt PQC, no question. They will also they're spending a lot of dollars, time and effort to understand how quantum physics or classical physics complements and reinforce the overall digital infrastructure fabric that they're building. They understood by launching quantum Euro QCI a few years back that 27 state nation inside of EU needed to take control of their mission critical communication infrastructure. Right. I heard this from NQS this morning, right? But they decided to spend, and they are spending dollars to actually build what NQS strategy is talking about. But it's not a replacement. It's actually a complement with PQC. So they will probably tweak a little bit their mathematics-based cryptography like the Chinese are doing, right? So China, look at what they're doing. They have 6, I think, satellite in the skies for quantum key distribution. They have 10,000 kilometers of reported quantum physics-based cryptography connecting their banks and critical centers. That's what we thought, that's what they talked to us about. That's all public information. So what else do they have, right? We don't know. But the answer from my perspective is not US versus or Canada versus. I would like Canada to approach this more from a complementarity perspective. It's not just PQC. It's actually the outcome that we should be training everybody to see and look at different ways to realize that outcome. But that's basically what my 2 cents in it.
Look, to be realistic, QKD and QKD approaches, quantum communications approaches, are very infrastructure intensive. They're costly. So one would expect that one would triage their data and identify what types of data require the highest level of security to justify that type of investment. I don't necessarily see a world where every piece of data is guarded or secured using multiple approaches. I think some types of data, some types of communication, especially for sensitive critical sectors, might behoove us to be crypto agile, which means investing in multiple, or at least investigating the possibility of using multiple actions to secure. Some are, quite frankly, they're less sensitive. They're cracked. It's not as important. So I think a multi-tiered approach is the way we're going. I think the other reality is that any quantum network based on QKD or quantum communications is a long-term ambition. I think with the amount of infrastructure, the amount of time, we have, like I said, we mentioned, we have a KeySat satellite that we are planning on sending up, which will be world leading. That still takes time. We've been in the development phase for a while because we are doing things that others haven't. But that being said, in the short term, PQC is, I believe, what we're looking at, what we're prioritizing for outside the government of Canada. I think CSE can speak to within the government of Canada. QKD is something we are looking at the possibilities and use cases at holistically, because that type of investment on a large scale would require crowding in of funding beyond the government. So we're investigating the possibilities.
I think just to add to that, EuroQCI, part of the strategy is that, and this goes back to David's slide about value creation. They see a quantum internet as disruptive. Like that is a disruptive component. So it's worth investing in, as opposed to a painkiller. But we're talking about painkillers here.
Yeah.
Right. We need PQC because of this threat. Okay. That's going to happen and we need this painkiller. But the quantum internet is a different thing. It's a new disruptive potential technology, quantum sensing and everything else.
Yeah.
So that's why they're investing. I don't know why the US is not investing as heavily, but there are some quantum networks in the US in the research community.
The last thing I'll say, because I speak too much, is PQC does not compete against QKD and vice versa.
Yeah.
So QKD, even in Europe, will never replace the use cases where PQC will be deployed. It will, for certain institutions and use cases, reinforce the security posture of the organization using double layers of KDF-derived function, different types of keys, or nested encryption. It reduces the risk for some certain organization, but it's not one versus the other. That's the...
Just one 10-second addition. On top of that, apologies, anywhere you have QKD, you would likely also have PQC. But the alternate is not necessarily true.
All right, Philippe, and then Bruno, and then we're gonna...
Very quickly, because things just keep coming up. Canadian quantum technology companies are hyper-focused and incredibly capital efficient, but I think that also breeds a bit of a famine mentality, and we were missing out on opportunities to, business terms, leverage synergies. There's a lot of ways these things can complement each other. They can grow each other's markets, and I think that's something we need to focus on a bit more. To address what the gentleman over there was saying, if you want to access global markets, then there has to be something normalized across all those geographies. And so standardization, in particular international standards, is a big deal there. The other thing I'll point out, because I want to talk to global affairs about this, export controls. Export controls are a huge, massive, unfathomably unbearable barrier to SMEs when it comes to global trade. And I can go on for hours about that, but reform export control policies is what I would say for the
Okay. Give you the last word, Bruno.
And as a product vendor, to your specific question, we find ourselves, because of the global fabric and it's not one ubiquitous set of algorithms. You have to be able to deal with PQC, QKD, classic, pre-shared key material capability. At the same time as in the geography that's North American, you go to the NIST algorithm. You go to Europe, you may have Germany that has a few more. You go to South Korea, you get a few more algorithms. The world is not a unique one facet. As a vendor, we have to recognize the fact that our design better be agile to live in here or there or here. And whatever the stack above us asks, whether it's a QKD ask with a combination of PQC or no, it's just PQC, we have to be agnostic. In essence, we have to be, and I completely agree with Martin, this is not a world where you have either PQC or QKD. You have to be you have to be bilingual and trilingual and whatever, polyglot, in order to deal with the world that we live in. And the geopolitics certainly expedite this need for being able to have the flexibility built in. So that's how we are seeing it and how we're designing for it. And we're not trying to pick fights. We're trying to be as agnostic as possible and as capable to help any one of those variants to exist. And that's it.
Thank you so much. I'm glad that Bruno was the last because he was the first when we started talking about this event. I'm so glad that we were able to get deeper into the issues. I was definitely will think about another format that we can continue this conversation. And if there are more questions, please send them back to us. You have the link, and we will initiate conversations that will follow with follow-up questions. But I'd like to invite everyone to come back to us with ideas about what the next thing would be. I think I like Tony's idea about bringing people dealing with programs, with competencies, with research, a little bit of a more industry research. And I know this is happening on many different places, but we have to look at our own yard and try to do something in this direction. Again, thank you so much, everyone. This was a long day. It's almost 1:30, I believe. No, 1:50. Yeah, so we were so eager to keep talking, and there'll be other opportunities to do this. Thank you so much.
Thank you.